We are live. Welcome everybody to the chat. I am going to be following along. I'm going to let Cheetah introduce everybody and what's going on tonight. My friend, you have the floor.
Yes, we are waiting for our special guest, August Ragone. He is having a little bit of technical difficulties. So he will be with us as soon as he can. But as you know, as you can see by we have special guests tonight. We have Casey, Interweb Kaiju. We have Cody from Coast to Coast. As you see, we're all celebrating Godzilla. Well, some of us are by having Godzilla names,
except for me.
That's okay. You're like the two little twins in the Mothra in Mothra. So yeah, he's having some technical difficulty. So August, I'll tell you a little bit of background with August. I've known him for many years, but he is probably the preeminent Godzilla guy that's going around. He's written over 150 articles and a book about Godzilla and his creator and all different kaiju. He's done Criterions. He's written articles for all the magazines that you know of and love. Anything that carries monsters, he's written for. He's run film festivals in the Bay Area, Godzilla film festivals. Anything Godzilla, he's probably done it all. In fact, in Japan, he is very respected in Japan as well for his knowledge about all things Godzilla and kaiju.
He just popped in the private chat saying he's here.
Oh, okay. Then Hobbs.
Okay, so apparently we can only have 6. I thought we could have 10. So
yeah, I thought we could have 10 too.
I think it might be. I think it might be 10 if you have the paid version of StreamYard.
Okay.
Is anybody that's not hugely Godzilla?
I'll step out so that he can go on. Oh,
I appreciate that, Boom.
Oh,
we lost a couple other people.
Well, you know what? Because we're gonna need the room for Ben and August.
Yeah, I can drop out if Vincent gets back in.
Oh, there he is.
We can leave it as is now. I'll chat with the others. You guys go ahead.
Okay.
Welcome, August. Welcome.
Hey, what's happening?
We all put our names out there in your honor.
I'm sorry?
I said we named ourselves in your honor.
Oh, shit. Thank you, man. Appreciate that.
Yeah, you got Mecha Godzilla, you got Hedorah,
yeah, there you go.
Jaguar. I was just telling the chat a little bit about you. You and I have known each other through music from California,
right?
And then I told him that I was surprised to find out that you are the man when it comes down to all things Godzilla and kaiju related, and have written over 150 articles. You've written for Criterion. It's just amazing.
I've done a lot of stuff. I don't know if you know. It all started when I was a kid, and I would see articles in monster magazines, like famous monsters, and most notably, it was like a photo caption that was in one issue with a photograph from Godzilla versus Megalon, and it identified the monster in the photo wrong. And I said, God, I wish these people would get this right, And that kind of set me on the path to start writing about this stuff to separate the wheat from the chaff and put the right names on the right things and the right people. And I locally in San Francisco Bay Area, we had a horror host in Creature Features named Bob Wilkins. And at that time in the early 70s, Godzilla and all those Japanese monster movies were very, 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 very popular. And so, they would show them on television. They get high ratings. kids wrote in tons of letters. And so Bob Wilkins put this word out that if anybody had any more information on upcoming movies, to write him at the station and let him know, and he'd pass the word on the air. And so he did a public appearance not long after that. And I stuffed this envelope full of magazines and clippings, and I wrote some stuff out, and I gave it to him. And a letter saying, when you're done with this stuff, send it back. Please send it back. And so about a couple months later, I got a phone call. I got home from school. My mother said, hey, you have to call Bob Wilkins at Channel 2. And after I was done, doing calisthenics and flip-flops and cartwheels around the room, I called Channel 2, and he said, would you like to come down on the show, be on the show and talk about Godzilla? Because there's a new movie coming to theaters called Godzilla versus Megalon. Do you know anything about it? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. So I went down to the station. I brought some Godzilla toys from Japan that I had, because we had a local Japantown here in San Francisco that carried such things, and went on the show, and I guess I sounded probably better than I do now. Yeah. But anyway, I made some kind of an impression, and then I built a relationship with our horror host, and I appeared on his various shows, like, I don't know, 30, 40 times on TV, starting from that one first appearance. And as a kid, started teaching myself since I went to Japantown, I had access to all this stuff. It was all in Japanese, and I wanted to know what it said. So I started studying Japanese on my own. And because I wanted to know what this stuff said. And plus the clerks at the stores I used to go to were sick and tired of me going, what does it say? What does it say right here? Like I pick up some book, like let's within reach. I'd go like, what is this? What does this say? What does it say about this monster right here? What does it say? What does it say? And they're like, go away, kid. Stop bothering us. We're trying to sell stuff. They were really cool to me and wrote stuff down. But after a while, it was sort of, I felt that I could do this on my own. I wanted to know more. So, and I started gathering information is the point on this stuff. And this whole new world opened up as well, going to Japantown, because there were all these movies and TV shows that had not come to America yet, where you could buy books and magazines and whatnot. So that's pretty much how I started my journey into all this stuff. And pen pals in Japan too.
The pen pals, did you find them from people that you met at Japantown or like elsewhere?
Yeah, there were a couple. Now we got to remember this is the 70s, so no internet, of course. And if you made a phone call to Japan, it was very expensive. I mean, just calling your relatives 50 miles away was expensive.
Yeah.
Now you can get unlimited. Like I have a phone with my internet connection, like a landline with my internet connection. In my landline, I can call like anywhere for nothing. It's all inclusive in my monthly bill. But pen pals. So one of the first pen pals I had was a guy who worked at a store at Japantown who went back to Japan, and we wrote each other a bit. And then there was, interestingly enough, or not interesting at all, I put out an ad in the Monster Times. Remember, does anyone know what I'm talking about? The Monster Times magazine?
Yep, I remember that.
Okay. The Monster Times was at the time you had the monster boom in America. Monster movies and horror films were huge. So there was an ongoing magazine from the 50s, as we know, Famous Monsters of Filmland. That ran for a long time, and it has been revived a couple of times. But during that big, huge wave in the early 70s, of all these, there was these fly-by-night magazines that came out that were trying to capitalize on what was going on, and they lasted 4 issues or 2 issues or whatever. But the Monster Times was like a newspaper, hence the Monster Times. and it was printed on newsprint, and he was double folded, so it opened up like a newspaper. And a lot of the journalism in that was really great because it was a lot of these New York guys that were genre fans, that were writers in their 20s and 30s, and you had a lot of comic book fans, and they had a lot of connections, and they all because Marvel and DC were all in New York too. So they talked about horror films, they talked about comic books, they talked about the pulps, they talked about stuff like the original Flash Gordon strips by Alex Raymond, and a lot of Godzilla coverage. More Godzilla coverage. Godzilla was sort of like their mascot character in a way. Because Famous Monsters, the editor of Famous Monsters, Forey Ackerman, or Uncle Forey, wasn't really a big fan of the Japanese monster movie or science fiction film. So he didn't really cover them a lot. When readers wrote in, he would publish photos, or they might reprint an old article. But it didn't cover it as much. Monster Times covered it more. So anyway, they in the back page of the Monster Times, they had a want ad section, and how this skull. This is a long story for a simple question, so at the time in San Francisco's Japantown, there was a store called Mikado, and they had a lot of model kits imported from Japan, and they had gotten Thunderbirds, Jerry Anderson's Thunderbirds. Everybody know what Thunderbirds is? Okay.
Yeah.
Mechagodzilla? You got it?
Yeah, I've seen the Thunderbirds, yeah.
Okay, great, excellent. So they got these model kits in, and I had seen Thunderbirds when I was really little and was like, oh my God, there's model kits. So it kind of gave me a little bit of a, I got a little bit of Thunderbirds fever. And so I wrote a letter took out a want ad rather in Monster Times that said, I'm looking for Thunderbirds materials, right? Whatever, everybody would take out, a lot of people would do want ads. I'm looking for Ray Harryhausen stuff, I'm looking for Hammer Horror, stuff like that. And so I asked for Thunderbird stuff, and the next thing you know, I get letters from Japan. The Monster Times had readers in Japan, and that's how I got one of my most valuable pen pals back in that day, which is completely, I never expected to hear from a pen pal, somebody in Japan about something that was British,
No.
But that's where those model kits I saw were from. So anyway, that's how one of the pen pals came, and then I got more pen pals as when the anime boom started in the late 70s. Myself and my friends were frequent shoppers at Kinokuniya bookstore in Japantown, and Kinokuniya books. We would order tons of stuff every month, all the new stuff coming out. We had subscriptions to a couple of Japanese animation magazines, like Animage. And so they said the store in Tokyo kind of noticed, like, there's some interest, there's an anime over there because one of your customers keeps ordering stuff. And I would gang order stuff. So we would have like 8 or 10 people that we hung out with that were into the anime. And so I would go, I want 8 of these books, 6 of these books, 4 of these books, depending on who was interested, right? And and so somebody in Japan noticed, and there was a magazine that they published where they said, can you write a letter and describe who your group is and who your friends are and what you do? And we did, and it got submitted in this Japanese magazine that was published, and then we got tons of more pen pals from that. So that's basically about a 20-minute answer to a 2-second question.
But you were building a community.
Very informative, though.
I'm sorry?
You were building a community.
Well, I guess. I don't know. We had, it was just a gang. It was like an R gang, It was like, 8 or 10 people, and then we'd drag a VCR to conventions. Or I would drag my VCR to conventions and just show up and go, hey, can I set this up somewhere? And I brought a VCR and a TV. like about a, I don't know, it was maybe about an 18, 20-inch television, huge hunking thing. And go, can we set up, and we've got these crazy Japanese cartoons. maybe can we show them? We're all teenagers, you know. We're going like, oh, yeah. And I think one show they said, hey, you can set up over there. It was in the dealer's room, right? And so we sat the TV and the VCR on the floor, and all these people started showing up and just sitting cross-legged on the floor, and we're watching like whatever tapes I was running. And because they were all in Japanese, I would explain what was happening.
Well, that is really cool.
That's how that happened. And then we did the first what's considered the first anime event out, you know, it's like a standalone anime event outside of Japan, anywhere in the world. Which who knew? But that was noted by anime historian Fred Patton, who was the guy who founded the Cartoon Fantasy Organization down in LA in the 70s, and he noted that in his book. I think it's called Reading Manga and Watching Anime, and he listed our event as the first event outside of Japan, focusing on anime. We also were showing, you know, Ultraman and Godzilla stuff too. But that was something that, again, was thanks to Bob Wilkins, the host of Creature Features, who sponsored it. He said, hey, why don't you put on an event, right? And I'm like, you know, I don't know, 15 or whatever, 16 years old. He's going, we're going to put on this event. And I'm going to give you this space. And there was this mall in Union City, California.
Oh, gosh.
Which is right outside of Fremont. It's pretty near Silicon Valley, basically. And there was a mall there called the Union City Mall. And there was an empty shop. And somehow Bob arranged for us to have that shop for 2 days on a Saturday and a Sunday. And so we brought a big TV in there. We ran, you know, episodes of Star Blazers and whatever shows we had traded with pen pals in Japan for, and some Godzilla movies and episodes of Ultraman and stuff like that. And apparently that became noted as like the first organized anime event. And then we did a few more for a few years, and each one got bigger, where we ended up going from the mall to renting out a big space in well, not that big, but it wasn't like we rented out a hall, but we rented out another space of comparable size to where we were the last couple of events in the Japantown Mall in San Francisco, and then we moved to a hotel. And near the San Francisco International Airport called the Dunphy, which was like a host to a lot of smaller science fiction conventions and gaming cons, like Dragon Con, are not the same Dragon Con from Atlanta, but isn't there that one in Atlanta called Dragon Con? It was like a local D&D show would also be there at the Dunphy Hotel, because the Dunphy Hotel looked like a castle. That was the motif on the outside of the hotel, was the facade was a castle. And we did their event there, and so that kind of launched me doing a lot of different things, from Channel 2 and talking about this stuff on Bob Wilkins' show, and then with John Stanley, who was the next host of Creature Features that took over in 1980, and then, you know, putting on events and actually having them be successful, and hell, that's pretty.
When did you start getting some notoriety over in Japan for your expertise? I mean, when did that start showing up?
Well, you know, I mean, I'm not well known in Japan at all, thank God, because I'm just saying. I'm sorry.
You're known. I was researching, and yeah, I saw your name in quite a few places on over in Japan.
Well, yeah, I guess I haven't looked recently. Maybe I should. But you know, I went there in 1985, and lived there for a spell. And you know, you're young and you got brass balls, and you go like, I'm going to go in Japan and I'm going to see how long I can stay there. I had like $1,000 in cash in my pocket. And I ended up being there. I got a job. I got a place to rent, and my mission was to try to meet as many people who worked on these films as possible. or TV shows. Some of it was kind of difficult. You know, some of the people were a little hard to find. It's interesting. Japanese fandom, it's what Americans would call gatekeeping. But the Japanese, you know, are very guarded about their people. You know, their celebrities. They're the fandom celebrities. So, you know, some of these guys I knew that they would come to America, and I met them that way. And they would come to America, and then I would take them around, and they would go to different points in the States. They would take these annual trips and go to like Los Angeles, and they do a bunch of people in the film industry, the special effects makeup industry. They would go meet people down there, and they would go here and there. I got them into Chris Walas's studio, and this is like, you know, this is in the early '80s, and it was they wanted to go meet Chris Walas and go to his studio. I had a friend that that worked there at Chris Walas's studio. He passed away not too long ago. Brent Baker. He worked on Gremlins and a bunch of other films, and he was a star guy over at Chris Walas's studio. And anyway, so I said, "Oh, I'll hook you up with that." I had no interest in going. I kind of kick myself now, you know. Like, I should have just went anyway. Go, I'm not really into the American science fiction films that much. I'm all about Japanese stuff. A little militant in those days, so you know, like I don't care. I don't care. I think I got those guys like into ILM because I knew a couple people. Like I went to high school with a guy who worked at ILM. And anyway, so those guys, when I went, they would go, "Hey, when you come to Japan, we'll, you know, take you to meet Ishiro Honda, the director of the original Godzilla and a bunch of the movies. And we'll take you to meet this guy and that guy and this guy because you've helped us out so much." And as soon as I get over there, I got stonewalled. I guess I called their bluff by showing up. So, it took a while. I don't know whether it was they didn't know how far they could trust me, you know, whether I was going to, it's mostly fear that you're going to do something that's going to embarrass them. Because the thing is, it's sort of like, you know, if, let's say, I came to meet somebody like Ishiro Honda, you know, they set that up right away. I'm there for a week, and they go, "Okay, we're taking you to Ishiro Honda's house for lunch or for dinner or whatever." And then I decide to take off my pants in his living room. You know, they will never live that down. You know, it'll be completely 100% their fault. You know, so.
I think we're being taken over by Gigan over there.
Oh, there he is.
Special guest.
Hey guys.
Wait, hang on. What?
We're getting taken over.
Give me all your pizza, guys. What's up?
I'm gonna have to send Jet Jaguar after him.
Oh man, don't do it. I'm gonna get my Godzilla ready to drop kick. Be friends to the end.
Oh yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Nice.
Wow, look at that.
I am normally what throws me off is the direction to put these things in sometimes on the camera, right? But anyway, so I have this guy wrapped in plastic. I usually bag on fans who keep their toys in bags. He's in a bag, so he backed me. Backed me. Who's in this one? Oh, there we go. This one's open.
He's got an army of Jet Jaguars.
Oh, nice.
And these are 70s toys.
King Caesar.
But this is Baragon.
Baragon, yeah.
Baragon.
From Frankenstein Conquers the World and
Right.
Destroy All Monsters and the Mike Douglas Show and Dick Cavett. May recognize him from Johnny Carson.
That is amazing.
But this is actually a reproduction of the original 60s and 70s toys. I used to have a whole mess of they're from a company called Bullmark, this particular one. But Bullmark was a Japanese company that produced a lot of this stuff in the 70s, and we could buy those at Japantown for like about $2 or $3 a piece. I mean, this size for $2 or $3, you know. And I had a considerable amount of my collection stolen in the about 84.
Oh,
And to buy all that stuff back, you know, because the prices spiked up on that stuff after Bullmark stopped making those toys in the late 70s. And so when they started doing reproductions, I just decided to buy the reproductions because they were a fraction of the price of the originals. Plus, the originals in Japan, you can rarely find one that's bagged mint. They all were pretty much children's toys. So a lot of them went in sandboxes and got scraped up. Kids would fight with them. So, you know, the toys would be kind of fragile. You know, they were left out in the sun because they're made out of soft vinyl. And they're pretty rough. And there are people, and the parents would write the kid's name on the feet or part of the body because of the kids were playing. You know, kids would do this anywhere in the world. Or that was mine. You know, they'd argue, that's my Luke Skywalker figure. No, I have the Boba Fett with the missile.
Now, did the collecting community? I mean, did it evolve over time? I mean, do they have, you know, like big figures now? Do they treat them? You know, are they marketed toward adults now?
In Japan, yeah. So a lot of the reproductions here, I think they're I forgot what the age range was on the tag. Some of them have tags that have like recommended for ages like, you know, 12 to 30 or something like that. I'm not sure, but they're definitely not no longer marketed strictly to kids. They're for the older fans. So any of the reproductions of the old toys are marketed towards adults. So there are children's toys that are produced by a company called Bandai, which is the largest toy company in Asia, one of the largest toy companies in the world. In fact, they have an American, you know, division. And for the last 20 years or so, they were making all the Power Rangers toys for the U.S., and that's been taken over by Hasbro now. But so, yeah, there are toys in Japan that are sold for kids, and then there's the big boys toys, which you have like sort of like a hyper detailed soft vinyl statues, basically, that start at about 30 centimeters tall, and they make larger. I think they started doing 25 centimeters, 30. So you got like a 9-inch, a 12-inch, and then they make gigantics, and that's by a company called X Plus. And they do these huge, and they're like not cheap. You know, they're the hundreds of dollars for one guy. You know,
Right.
So I'm here in Indiana, and you know, trying to find Godzilla toys around here. You didn't as a kid, and
Right.
It wasn't until I got into my 20s, Toys R Us started carrying the Bandais.
Right.
And I could actually get some and put them on the shelf as, you know, a collectible for me.
Right. Was
but,
that
but well past the age to play with them.
Right, exactly. There's more and more like they become more like tchotchkes, you know, like putting these on the shelf, and you got to dust them, you know.
Yeah.
Try to explain them to women when they come over the house.
Yeah.
What are those? Oh, these are expensive Japanese antiques.
Actually, you have to explain the women to the toys, I think. That's how that works.
Yeah, I guess so. You know?
She's just a girl. Don't worry about it.
Oh.
Still my first love, guys.
She means nothing to me.
Exactly.
So
It's all about Megalon.
Is it safe to say, August, that the pretty much how the whole world of Japanese animation, you know, all the, you know, everything that is Japanese, you know, what we know, you know, all the series, all the shows, it really just boiled down to Godzilla 54, doesn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's sort of the nexus point for everything, you know. And I mean, there were Japanese fantasy films made, you know, before Godzilla. There were fantasy films that go back to the very early days of Japanese films, the 20s and even before the 1920s. And in fact, one of the first, what's considered the first Japanese movie ever made, which is called Momojitari, which is a Maple Leaf Festival, is based on a kabuki play. And a lot of the early Japanese films were kabuki plays, like stage plays, right? It's about a demon that attacks a demon who disguises itself as a beautiful woman, and it attacks a samurai. And then but the samurai knows he's coming to hunt this demon, and and it's acted out very exaggeratedly because it's a kabuki play. And that was the first Japanese film ever made, and it was a fantasy film. So they've been doing this kind of thing a long time. Their history and their culture and their mythology is and folklore is just stuffed with supernatural things. In fact, the base concept of the Force in Star Wars comes from Shinto, the indigenous Japanese religion, in which all things, this bottle of Coca-Cola, just the glass itself has the potential for life. The Coke in the bottle has potential for life. And what they mean by life is also sentient life. So that's why you'll find things in Japanese fantasy or science fiction where rock comes to life, or a book comes to life and starts walking around. It can converse with human beings, and that's deeply ingrained in their culture. So they're easily, like, some of the things that maybe some Westerners find strange or perplexing, laughable or ridiculous, depending on how they take it. In some Japanese fantasy films, is just because it's all of it's done from a different frame of reference. I'm sure they find our Judeo-Christian hang-ups in Western culture to be equally amusing or interesting to them, or as Spock would say, fascinating.
Right. I can get that.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that really surprised me, if you really think about it, it is really surprising, is the fact that they made Godzilla 54 only 9 years after the war ended. I mean, it's not a very long time. I mean,
no. But the interesting thing about that is, or not, maybe it's not interesting. I only think it's interesting, is that a lot of Western, out of the gate, when the first movie was released in the United States in 1956, right out of the gate, critics were going, this is Japan's response to the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it really was not. It's not. It really isn't. Of course, because it was so close between the production and the release of the film in the United States and the end of the war, which is about 11 years or less, the Americans are going to think that immediately. Most Western people would. But it was currents that were happening in Japan that were also international incidents that were the current topics. Now, what had happened, which really pushed this movie to be made, was Toho Studios, the company that produced the Godzilla films, was going to be doing this big international production with the country of Indonesia. And it was kind of to reconcile the end of, or reconcile what happened in the war between Japan and Indonesia. And it was a sort of a gesture of friendship. And because this is a new era, we're in the post-war, post-Pacific War era, let's tie bonds and become friends, right, in the Pacific, in Asia. And it was a big production that was going to be made and shot in Indonesia with all the top stars in Japan and Indonesian stars. And some negotiations fell through, and the government wasn't really happy with it because, the situation was kind of tenuous between Japan and Indonesia politically. So that film got abandoned, and a young producer named Tomoyuki Tanaka was assigned that film, and he had to come back to Tokyo, back to the studio, and explain why it all fell apart. And usually when something like that happens in a Japanese studio, and it also happens in Hollywood, some producer screws up or something happens around him where the whole thing falls apart through no fault of his own, but he's the guy that's responsible, you get fired, right?
Right.
So he's on the plane. He's taking this plane ride from Indonesia, from, I think, Jakarta, back to Tokyo. And the guy's sweating bullets, He's sweating bullets. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Maybe I can suggest a film to fill in that blank, because the budget had been allotted. They're ready. They were pretty much ready to go on this movie, right? And so he dreamed up the idea, according to legend. He dreamed the idea up of a giant monster movie on his flight back.
So it was
And-
Tanaka's idea.
Yeah, it was Tanaka's idea initially, according to legend. And so he remembered reading some trade magazines that had talked about how big of a hit The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms was in the United States, which was produced by Warner Brothers.
Right.
The year before, it was released in the United States in 1953. I think it was released in the summer of 53, if I recall correctly. Don't write any hate mail if I got that right. You can just say, "Here's the real time." So you can send that hate mail straight to me if I got that information wrong. But I believe it was released in 1953. It wasn't scheduled to be released in Japan anytime soon. So by the time this all happens, what I'm telling you is happening, and he's on the plane sweating, it's early 1954, right?
Wow.
So the movie had already came and went in the States, it didn't play in Japan. It was imported for Japan by Toho's rival of Toho's studios, Daiei Studios, which had a contract to release Warner Brothers films in Japan. And usually those would play like foreign films. They were considered, American films in Japan were foreign films. So they would play in like one theater, like, we had art house theaters here. So, if you lived in a big enough city, maybe some art house would play a Japanese movie, play like, Kurosawa movies or whatever. And so it would be one theater. They wouldn't open up widely. You'd have to find that theater in a big city or whatever and go to that theater. So Beast from 20,000 Fathoms was not released in Japan until a month after Godzilla played in Japan. So there was really no way for anybody to copy the movie, because even if Toho flew people to America to see it, it was already out of theaters for like 8 months, right? So anyway, Tanaka had this idea. He had saw the ad campaign, read about it in the trades, according to Tanaka, and he comes back to the studio and he goes, "I know what we could replace this with. Why don't we do a giant monster movie?" Right? And the head of production at the studio was like, "Tell me more."
Now, is that how is this name? Is it Tsuba? I can't pronounce this last name, but it starts with a T, right?
Right. So it's like all Japanese words can be pronounced very easily if you do it phonetically, because everything's like letter vowel.
Okay.
So the first three letters are TSU, which is just Su.
Subaraya.
Yeah, Su Ba, but in this case it's Subu. It's Buraya. So it's Suburaya.
Subaraya.
It's like
Okay.
if you say Honda or Honda, it's the same kind of thing. Or what's another one, like, oh God, why am I drawing a blank now? There's other Japanese words that people will stumble over, but they're actually, if you look at them phonetically and the key, you can read them pretty easily. You can pronounce them pretty easily. They're not that difficult.
I was always under the impression that Subiara was the one who made Japan, but I mean Godzilla. Was not aware of Tanaka's involvement.
Right. So, Subaraya was already at the studio. He had already been a noted filmmaker. He was a lauded director of cinematography in the 20s and 30s. And then in 1933, he saw two movies that changed his life. So he's a director of photography. He's a cinematographer. He's
Right.
well noted. And he goes and sees two American movies in 1933 that changed his life. One was, it's not Todd Browning. James Whale. It was James Whale's The Invisible Man, and the original King Kong. And those two movies changed his life. He became so fascinated by King Kong that he managed to get his own personal print of Kong not long after it played in Japanese theaters, which it played the same year as it played in the United States. It was 1933.
Wow.
He was just about 31 years old when he saw it, and he went, "Okay, I'm changing gears." He started working in the Japanese film industry as a cameraman when he was 19 years old. So here you are, he's 19. This is like 11, 12 years later, and he sees King Kong, and he goes, I'm going to do these special effects things, because back in those times they didn't tell you how things were made, right? Even in the press and what was released in newspapers or the magazines, a lot of it was like, even the filmmakers would give misdirection because they didn't want their trade secrets getting out to other studios or other filmmakers. So they would basically lie about how things were made, how they accomplished the effects for Kong. What Tsuburaya did is he got his own print of Kong, and he got on a moviola. Everybody knows what a moviola is?
No.
That's where you take the reel of film, and do you know Mechagodzilla?
No.
I don't want to assume. So a moviola is how they used to edit films, which is it's basically a viewer with 2 arms for the reels, and you put the film in, and you could watch it on a viewer about this big, and you can go frame by frame to find where you want to edit the film. Or a lot of film editors would just you could hand crank it, and you could just watch and see where you want to stop or start or cut or whatever. But Tsuburaya took it and did that so he could watch the movie frame by frame, and he took notes and figured out that it was, that they had used stop motion puppets.
Okay. He basically reverse engineered it.
Right, he reverse engineered it by studying the film, and he wanted to do that for Godzilla. And the amount of scenes that they had in the script that involved special effects, they said, "Well, how long would it take to do this stop motion?" He goes, "Oh, probably about 7 years." He was exaggerating and joking, of course, but he meant because Toho was like, "We need this movie shot and finished in 3 months or 4 months." And he's going, you want me to do stop motion, it'll take 7 years. So, they came up with, doing it as a man in the suit.
Okay. So the man in the suit was basically by necessity.
It was basically by necessity, but it had already been done before because there were already a couple of films made with gorillas in Japan. So they had their own gorilla guy, in Japan, running around in gorilla suits. So we had Charles Gamora in the classic films here in the States, and or just even a Three Stooges short, be Charlie Gamora, running around as the ape, or later on, you have Bob Burns doing Tracy in the original, what was it, the real Ghostbusters, the live action filmation Ghostbusters show. But so they decided to do it that way and do everything with miniatures. And by this time, Tsuburaya had already won extensive awards for miniature special effects work, especially during World War II, where they were making reenactments of battles.
He was their version of John Ford. He made propaganda films in World War II.
Yeah, basically, your government in the United States, they go, it's your duty, Hollywood, to help us with the war effort by making these films that are going to build whatever, build buy bonds, but to build resolve in the American people, blah blah blah. But in Japan, it was sort of like the imperial government is ordering you to make this film, or you will be taken out and shot. So
Ooh,
I mean, it was like an fascist imperial government. So they went, "You're making this film. We selected you to make this film, Tsuburaya. You have to make it. You can't say no." And he was a pacifist, really. He was drafted into the army before World War II because he was already, by the time he did Godzilla, he was already like 51 or 52 when he shot Godzilla. So they decided to do it, completely with miniature effects and the guy in the suit. And Japanese critics, when the film was released, Japanese film critics, like film critics almost anywhere in the world, except for now. Now it's kind of weird. This is a whole sidebar, but anybody could be a critic now. Back in the day when guys that wrote critique for films in magazines like Cine East, or other film magazines, and for national newspapers or city newspapers like New York or Los Angeles, San Francisco. They were kind of snobs. I mean, these were guys that had been, loved films. They've been writing about film. A lot of these guys were older film critics. But even the younger film critics, like in the 70s, you had late 60s, you had God dang it, what's his name, man? Well, folks, senility is
the premier critic in the 60s for San Francisco. Wasn't that Khan?
Well, I'm thinking Rex Reed is who I was thinking about.
Okay,
but whatever, same difference. You had Judith Crist, you had Rex Reed, you had these different critics, but they were all snobs. So populist films they considered junk, But anyway, so the Japanese film critics were not much different, and so they called the original Godzilla junk and garbage. They used those words in Japanese. This film, one person said this looks like something someone threw up.
Wow.
And Honda kind of laughed at those reviews because the public thought completely differently. And the film was a box office hit. You had lines around the block, like going to see Star Wars in 1977, when you couldn't order your tickets online and get your seat ahead of time. You had to be first in line so you could run to your preferred seat, the seat you wanted to sit at. The guy in the end of the line got the bad seats, So, that made that film a big, huge hit, where the people who reacted very positively to the film. But the thing that, I said it wasn't based on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there was a more recent incident that also happened at the same time, around the same time that Tanaka was sweating on that plane ride. And that was the Bikini H-bomb tests that America was conducting in the South Pacific, at the Bikini Atoll.
Yeah.
And a Japanese fishing trawler had wandered into the waters of the test because they weren't properly warned, and they got ash on them, sort of like the main character in The Incredible Shrinking Man. And the guys on the boat got sick, and one of them died within months of coming back into port. So they were exposed to radioactive fallout really badly.
Yeah.
And they had a full trawler full of tuna. They were fishing tuna. And then that tuna, by the time that someone found out that they were actually radioactive,
the fish are mutated.
No, not at all. The fish were distributed to fish markets. So that gets out to go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, Ben's got his pizza, so I wanted to know if anybody wanted to ask you some questions. Some things maybe to kind of open up kind of pick your brain a little bit. If anybody had anything they wanted to kind of touch base with you on.
About the genesis of Godzilla. Does anybody have any questions about the genesis?
The first book of Godzilla? Just kidding.
Well, I guess that would be that would actually be the first Godzilla would be the first one, but
right.
I'm just fascinated how it came together. I did not know a lot of these details.
Right. Yeah. So let me just wrap this up, and then we can go to other stuff, right? So the tuna gets distributed. That causes a nationwide panic because it got mixed in with a lot of other fish that was from other fishing trawlers. So nobody knew. It was like Where's Waldo, trying to find the radioactive tuna. So you had like government people going to fish markets and fish shops with a Geiger counter trying to find the radioactive tuna. And it caused a nationwide panic. The Japanese government blamed the United States. The United States offered Japan reparations, cash reparations, and the Japanese said, F you. We don't want your damn money. You need to apologize for this. The American government wouldn't apologize for it. It's like, this is national news. This is like shocking. And the Japanese press and the people labeled it the new atomic bombing of Japan.
Oh, wow.
So that was the topic on everyone's head. So remember, the beginning of Godzilla, what happens at the beginning of Godzilla is a fishing trawler gets sunk by Godzilla. That's a direct reference to this incident. The name of the ship was the Lucky Dragon #5. and they just slightly changed the name of the ship for the movie. You know, they had a kind of a different name, and it was a number 5, I believe. So that's what was based on the film and how the film came about.
Wow. So after the first one, I mean, how did the now I know that there's 2 different versions. They had the Japanese version only, and then they had to bring in an American actor to sell tickets. I mean, so how
Right.
did Raymond Burr come into play into this?
Right. Well, that's pretty much what they decided, that you couldn't release a film in the United States that had no known actors on the credits. Like a full Japanese cast film wouldn't have any chance on the market. You know, and pretty much monster movies and science fiction movies were essentially sort of the realm of young people and children. You know, they weren't considered, highbrow entertainment. Adults did go to them. You see photographs from, people lining up to see, the War of the Worlds, the George Pal 1953 production. And you see, throngs of people, and it's mostly adults, so they decided, well, you needed to have an American actor in it. So they hired Raymond Burr to come in and shoot his scenes. They had an American film editor, who did a little bit of directing, named Guy Rowe. There was Guy Rowe was the other guy, and then I haven't had my Wheaties today. So it was Terry O. Morse who came in and directed the scenes with Raymond Burr. And then they had written a script based around the Japanese script and to fit him into the scenes. I got the idea from a character that was in the Japanese film that was sort of a peripheral character, tertiary character who was a news reporter who's in most of the Japanese version, but he's sort of a side character. And they decided, hey, why don't we make the reporter the main character, and he'll tell the story in flashback, which is already a gimmick that, had been done on a lot of other American films, doing the flashback.
Sure.
That was, and it was a success. I mean, the critics either said, hey, this is pretty good, but no one ever said, this is the greatest thing I ever saw. It was like either that it's pretty good, it's startling. There were some really some pretty interesting reviews of that movie that wouldn't maybe play well right now. This movie might frighten. I think one quote was, "This movie may frighten children and women." Like basically, like men are not going to be frightened by this movie, but children and women will be perhaps frightened by this movie.
Now, could you explain to us, if you can, could you break down the different eras? Why are they considered different eras? I've always wanted to know that.
Well, that was an artificial framing that was basically created by fans in Japan, writing fanzines, and they wanted to group the Godzilla movies by sort of the tone of the times. Now, this is not like something that Toho Studios came up with. This is purely fan invention that got into when some fans became like writers for some pop culture magazines, and then that sort of spread to the public, and then the press at large, the media at large from there. So it was purely fan invention of coming up with these eras. Now, the first is now considered the first batch of 15 movies are the Showa era, which is SHOWA, Showa. And that is the reign of the Emperor Hirohito, who also presided over World War II. And then he, passed away in the late 80s. So from the time of the first film in 1954, that was done during that reign, the Japanese note years by the era of the Emperor, and that continues to this day. I mean, they still use the Roman, or it's not the Roman calendar. I can't remember what it's called. Our calendar is never mind. But they don't use they do use 1972 or our calendar, the year of our Lord calendar. but they also have their own calendar based on the era of the reign of the emperor. That would be going like, the Reagan years, it's like, because emperors can reign until they drop dead or they step down, So that first era covers the first 15 Godzilla movies from 1954 to 1975. And then you get into, and it kind of covers Godzilla 1985, which was in Japan in 84. And then he died a couple years later. So the next film after that was Godzilla versus Biollante in 1989, which was a new era of the new emperor, the emperor's son. And that became the Heisei era. And so when the emperor would be noted under the name of the era, it's sort of like that's his era name. And so that's why they do that. They kind of compartmentalize it so people can think of it. It's tied in. I can't even articulate this well tonight.
My favorite Godzilla era is definitely the Reagan years.
Yeah. You got one movie in the Reagan years, or you got Godzilla 1985 where they stuck Raymond Burr right back in it again.
That was a good movie though. My Heisei is my favorite era.
Yeah,
for sure.
My favorite is of course the older movies, so 54 to 75. Go ahead.
Those are fun, but I think I grew up sort of in the Heisei era, so
right.
Whenever I think of Godzilla, I just view the '89 suit in my head. That's what pops up.
Right. Yeah, that was a real popular design in a recent poll in Japan among fans. A national poll voted that Godzilla versus Biollante is like the #1 favorite Godzilla movie.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's just recently got a 4K scan.
The Blu-ray has been sold out. The North American Blu-ray.
The American Blu-ray. Well, the new version that's coming out, which is a 4K scan, they're 4K scanning all the Godzilla movies in Japan. So these things will be the next level up from Blu-ray. That's going to be ultra high definition.
Well, you can do a 4K scan without releasing it on 4K. Like a lot of Blu-rays have a 4K scan that is then transferred to 1080.
Right. They downscale to 2K. Yeah. So that they're being shown on TV in Japan right now, downscaled to 2K, but Japan is eventually going to be doing the UHDs, and there's going to have true 4K. They're repairing the films too. They're just not scanning them; they're repairing all the films. And I have a copy of the original King Kong versus Godzilla from '62, which is the 4K scaled down to a 2K. And it is the best the film has ever looked in any format, period. And I've owned every format that film's been in. And it's the best it's ever looked. They fixed all the problems with that film. Physically, all the physical problems with that film. It looks pretty amazing, and I can't imagine it with 2K up higher in quality. And it did get a minor, in select theaters screening in Japan not long ago. And
well, they're still playing the older movies in Japan on theaters.
Only they're only doing these 4K scans. They've only done 2 of them in theaters, and it's a limited select theaters. They did the original 54, which they did a 2K scan of. The Criterion collection of the original Godzilla 54 only is 2K. They did a 2K. Criterion was allowed to do a 2K scan of the actual film elements, and then meanwhile Toho was doing their own 4K, and then they did King Kong versus Godzilla, and only those 2 did the select theaters. The end of this year, I think it's in December. Yeah, this coming December, they're going to be premiering theatrically a 4K of the original 1961 Mothra. But there's going to be 8 movies that just started this month that are 4K scans of 8 different Godzilla films that are going to be playing on cable television in Japan, satellite cable in 2K downscales. And that's the original 54. They're going to show King Kong versus Godzilla, Mothra versus Godzilla, Ghidorah, Monster Zero, Destroy All Monsters, Godzilla versus Hedorah, and by Biollante. So they're premiering all those this month on Japanese satellite cable. I'm getting copies of everything.
Nice.
Yeah, a friend of mine's burning them all for me. So,
any questions from the chat? Any questions from the chat? I'm gonna step away for a second as far as questions go, and let my three amigos here come in because I'm sure they have tons of questions.
I think there was one. Someone was asking why 98 was in New York City. I don't know where that.
Oh yeah. Why was it in New York City?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. You'd have to ask Emmerich.
That was
You'd have to ask the guys that made the movie. It's like the more and more I saw of that movie being revealed, and that was the very early time of any kind of fandom, Godzilla fandom on the internet, was sort of coalesced with the production of that movie. And when the original designs were first posted, they did the reveal. I don't remember. I think it was because I don't like that movie. I don't care about that movie. I don't think about it much at all. So a lot of that information just goes right out of my head.
I don't think anybody really thinks about it.
Yeah, thankfully I've been able to make a lot of that disappear. But the first things that were on the internet were, I think it was leaked photos of a toy prototype or something like that. And just the design alone turned me off from wanting to have anything to do with this movie. But why was it in New York? Because the only thing I could say is that most American monster movies of the 50s and 60s, anytime a monster attacked America, it was either Los Angeles, which Los Angeles is kind of flat and spread out, a lot of lower buildings at the time back in the 50s and 60s, so it wasn't very dramatic for scale. So like a lot of Universal produced monster movies in the 50s, like Tarantula and Monolith Monsters, those are all set like in sort of like central Southern California out in the desert, because the landscape is more interesting than the landscape of Los Angeles. You had War of the Worlds, they attacked Los Angeles, and that. New York is more interesting in terms of cityscape. So, I mean, that's probably why they picked New York. But back in the day, whenever aliens invaded, man, it was Washington, D.C., New York City, or San Francisco because of the bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge, mostly. How many times has that Golden Gate Bridge been destroyed?
Not enough times, man.
But yeah, I mean, there's no real. I'm pretty sure they picked it geographically because it would be more interesting, and then they could play with the characters. The characters could be sort of like your typical New Yorkers. Your typical movie New Yorkers. I think these aren't real New Yorkers. These are movie New Yorkers.
I think the easy answer to it is, it was the American production of Godzilla, and they had to Americanize it. If it attacked Tokyo, most people wouldn't care from the American.
Right. Yeah. Naturally, you do that's why Godzilla attacked. People go, why did Godzilla attack Japan all the time? Because they're Japanese movies.
Right.
They're made for a home audience. So, people want to identify the main audience wants to identify with what's happening. So if you do an American movie, it's set in America, pretty much.
Well,
the last two legendary Godzilla movies, they attacked San Francisco, and the last movie was Boston. And then this one that's coming up, I don't know, it's Hawaii. Do they fight in Hawaii? They fight in Hong Kong or somewhere? I don't know. I don't have a whole lot of interest in seeing Kong versus Godzilla or Godzilla versus Kong. No, not much interest.
Do you think the American? Okay, so here's. Okay, I was going to leave this for somebody else, but I'm just dying to know. So who won the first fight between Godzilla and King Kong?
It's a tie. No one won. It's a tie. They did it. They took the chicken route, because if you did one win over the other, somebody's gonna be pissed off, right? And argue about it forever. Toho issued a foreign sales brochure that wasn't for sale to the public. This is a sales brochure. If you're a film distributor, you go to a Cannes Film Festival in France, and you go by Toho's booth, and you pick up their brochure catalog. And there was a catalog that came out in around 63, I think, 62 or 63, written in English with here's all Toho's latest films you can buy. King Kong versus Godzilla is there. And then somebody who wrote the colorful descriptions in that book in Toho's publicity department, wrote that Kong wins. But that contradicts everything in all the Toho press that's ever come out on this film back from the original release. It always says, who wins, Godzilla or Kong? And that's what they don't tell you you don't say who wins, even if you're going to have a winner in the publicity material, because then you go I just, this guy wins. I don't have, why do I need to see the movie? I already know. But the Toho did a cop-out. They both monsters fall into the ocean.
Well, I give that one up to Kong because he swam away and Godzilla didn't wake up till the next movie. So
right. Well,
to me, you guys ass laid out for a year.
Well, the flip side of that is Kong ran away.
Yeah.
Godzilla stood his ground underwater because Godzilla's amphibious. So he wasn't. We don't know if he's knocked out. They don't show him. He lives underwater. So he could have been going like this. Go away, you hairy ape. We don't know. It's ambiguous. No one in the dialogue of either film says one was a decisive winner or the other. It's just sort of they fall in the ocean. It's sort of like in wrestling. Some guy gets hit with a chair from a third heel comes in, hits one of the guys on the head. The whole match is thrown off. The bell rings. You have to call it off because there was interference.
How did they get the rights to King Kong anyway? That's another question I always wondered. How did they acquire the rights to King Kong, or was that their version of it?
No, they had to get the rights. What the short form is. Okay, get ready. Willis O'Brien, who did the special effects of the original King Kong, kept proposing other movies after Mighty Joe Young. He wanted to do a film called basically Frankenstein versus Kong versus Frankenstein, or another version was Kong versus Prometheus, which was going to be a monster that was sewn together from different parts of African animals and be this big hulking thing, and then it turned into something else. And there are various developments of it that kept getting rejected by studios as too expensive to make. And then Carl Denham reappears and wants to stage a boxing match between Kong and this new monster in San Francisco. So it doesn't get anywhere. So a young Universal producer, Universal Studios producer who left Universal, talked to Willis O'Brien and said, let me try to shop this idea around. He shopped it to Toho. Toho said, well, we'd be interested in it, but why don't we put our own monster in it and make Godzilla instead? And the deal was sealed, but Willis O'Brien was cut out of that deal by this American producer named John Beck. And they wrote the script. They went to Toho, said, we want to make this thing, but you have to pay for the rights to Godzilla, to Kong. So Toho had to buy the rights to Kong from RKO. And that's how that happened. And they got a lease. They got a lease on Kong for 5 years. So before that lease went up, they made King Kong Escapes in 1967. Okay. So that was only we still have Kong, and they paid the equivalent of $1 million at that time to buy the rights just to use Kong.
For 5 years.
From our Toho had to pay for that.
Oh wow!
John Beck says, I'm going to own the rights worldwide to this movie. You have the rights for Asia, but you're going to pay for all of it. It's just my idea. So no wonder Toho doesn't have a really high regard for American studios.
Wow.
They got burned a few times. But that's how Kong came about for that movie.
How about you guys? Got some more questions? Because
Martin had a question earlier in the chat.
I don't know if he's still there.
Well, he asked it nonetheless. The question was, What are your opinions on Western films that emulate Japanese kaiju movies such as Pacific Rim?
Well, I think Pacific Rim's great. I wrote a review of the Pacific Rim Blu-ray for Video Watchdog magazine a few years ago when Pacific Rim came out on Blu-ray. I really liked it because it was honest, and Del Toro, like me, he grew up in Mexico, but I grew up in San Francisco, but we both watched the same stuff as kids, and he saw a lot more stuff than I did that was imported from Japan and shown on TV in Mexico. They got way more than we got in the United States in terms of the TV shows. So, he grew up with Gigantor, the animated cartoon that was distributed in the United States, Tetsujin 28, Ultraman, of course. They got Ultra 7 in the 60s, and the sequel, the follow-up to Ultraman, they got that in Mexico too. The Space Giants and all these other animated and live-action superhero and kaiju TV shows. So Del Toro grew up as a fanatic of that stuff, and you could there was actually a TV special in Japan when they were promoting Pacific Rim, and they took him to a toy store, and they had the whole section of Ultraman monsters, right? And he was picking them up and naming all of them like cold. And everybody in Japan was like, "Oh my God, he's really a nerd. He's really deep into this stuff." So, it's like, and also Del Toro, is a fan of my book. I found out he wrote a very, very nice tweet about my book about Eiji Tsuburaya, which was really neat. And I, of course, screenshotted that and going to be framing it eventually.
So
selling copies at a flea market.
So Godzilla, obviously, like we said it's the singular event as for everything else. So what came next after Godzilla? I mean, how did they decide to expand that universe? Though they didn't call it that then, of course. But right. How did they decide to go with the different monsters?
Yeah, the filmmaking is the same all over, right? So you have a big hit picture. What does the producer say? Make another one. So they follow up with Godzilla Raids again, made within 6 months of the release of the first movie. They rushed it into production.
Wow.
Let's just get this thing out there. Let's make another one. You already have the infrastructure in place. We did it the first time. A lot of we spent a lot of time developing, getting the first film ready. So you should be able to roll right into the next one pretty quickly. And the bottom line with any studio back in those days was like, get this movie done next week.
It just amazes me if you go back you look at the movies now and people laugh at them, because they're obviously models and stuff like that. But I just always thought, like, how much time did it take for them to continuously build those sets?
Right. I don't think a lot of people necessarily laugh. There are people who are probably not. They're probably not fans in the first place, and not meaning that they're not a true Godzilla fan. Pardon me. They're they're just like casual moviegoers that laugh at movies that are in black and white anyway. Or they think all old movies are laughable. Like every year I go to before this, but in the before times.
Yeah.
Before the pandemic. I used to go every year to this thing called the Film Noir City, which was the San Francisco Film Noir Film Festival. And it's all films from, the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s that are all, thrillers and with femme fatales and gumshoes or, guys on the run. It's a whole genre. If you've ever seen a film noir, they're fantastic. A lot of, films like Casablanca and The Maltese Falcon. And we'll be in a theater with 1,400 people watching these films from the 30s and 40s, and people laugh at them. People laugh at the dialogue and the acting style of the time, and it's. I've never, even when I was a kid, I never laughed at that stuff because I put myself in, and I'm not special. A lot of other people in my generation did watching, in the 70s. you had like 8 or 9 channels, and that goes back to the 50s and 60s and 70s. And in the 80s, we start getting the wide proliferation of cable television. But, you had like, 4 to 6 local channels, and a couple channels might be you'll have 1 or 2 stations that are the movie channels, the channels that have the largest film library out of the other channels. And so you saw movies. I grew up watching movies on TV. You watched whatever was on TV. You didn't get to pick it. You didn't get to go, I demand. I want to put this on demand. No, you're going to watch it. If not, go outside and play. Right. So we were exposed to films. And I knew the actors from the 30s and the 40s. I knew who Humphrey Bogart was when I was a kid, and he had already died before I was born, so it was a different time. And
did those movies inspire you as far as when you're watching Godzilla? Did that inspire you in starting to write about what you were watching?
In a way, that came mostly from from people making mistakes in magazines and books.
Okay, so the writing.
And I went, that's wrong, and but I watched every god danged monster movie that came on TV, man, when I was a kid. So whatever it was, whether it was Invasion of the Saucermen, or Day the Earth Stood Still, whether it was highbrow, lowbrow, or in between, I watched all of them. And as kids, we didn't go like, oh, that's black and white, ew, because we grew up with that. We grew up with films that were in black and white, and some films were in color, and we didn't even sit there and go, why is it that way? It was just accepted. So the writing part I explained at the top of the show, which was basically, I saw mistakes in magazines and books like Famous Monsters or other books published by guys like Jeff Robin or people that sort of discarded the Japanese films in their books. And I said, I want to elevate these films by writing about the good things that people should look for in these movies. Why are these movies worthy? And that's what I wanted to explain to people. And I was more inherently interested as a kid in who made the movies, how the movies were made, more than which monster had the stronger tail or which monster could beat who. I could care less about that stuff.
But now that you're older, right? Now that we're all older. Now, do you go over to look back at those old movies and start looking at like which monster kicked ass the most? Because I know I'm older than you are, and I look and I watch those movies now. I just love the fight. I just like to figure out how one thumps the other.
I just kind of enjoy the movies for what they are as I'm watching them.
Yeah.
Meaning I go into the world of the movie. I don't sit there and watch them and go like, well, this scene must have been shot this way.
Oh,
no.
no.
He must have put the lighting, because that takes you right out of the movie. I enjoy the movies for the story that's within the movie. So I turn on one of those movies. I hate to use this phrase because it's taken the wrong way by a lot of people. It's like I don't turn my brain off. My brain goes on autopilot, and I just enjoy the story. Like I can watch the original Star Wars every day, and I immediately am taken back to opening day, December 2nd, 1941. I go back to May 25th, 1977, when 3 friends of mine from school, we skipped school to go across town on a bus to go see Star Wars, and the only movie theater was playing for a 50-mile radius here in San Francisco, called the Coronet Theater. And we went to the 1:00 show, which was the first showing of the day on Wednesday, May 25th, 1977. And we sat and watched Star Wars 2 times in a row. This is before they cleared the theaters. This is before the lines down the street. The movie's opening day. And we were into seeing whatever movies came out, but we were especially like when we went to see like Logan's Run the year before. It was because it was casual to go see science fiction, horror, and monster movies, because especially that point in the 70s, because you didn't have to wait in long lines unless it was the Apes movies, the Planet of the Apes films. Those were, super huge. But most movie theaters, you just buy a ticket, go sit wherever you wanted, and so, we just walked in and saw Star Wars, and then within a week, it had the lines down the block, and then you were waiting 2 hours to get in and all that fun stuff. But, but when I think of when I watch Star Wars now, my point is that it takes me back to that first time every single time. So when I watch one of the Godzilla films, that takes me back to not necessarily when I first, it makes me recall all that, but, it depends on which version I'm watching. If I'm watching one of the original American dubbed versions, like Godzilla versus the Thing, or King Kong versus Godzilla, the original print, the original version of the American International release of Destroy All Monsters, let's say, that brings me back to that moment in time.
Again, do you guys have questions?
Chad had a few questions. I think someone was asking about thoughts on Cloverfield and Godzilla's Revenge.
Okay, Cloverfield. How many people remember In Living Color, the TV show?
Jim Carrey?
Jim Carrey was in that. You had the Wayans brothers. And then you had two guys that reviewed movies called Men on Film. And as far as Cloverfield is concerned, hated it.
Oh.
I did not like Cloverfield. It's not that I didn't like the monster. It's not like I didn't like the special effects. I hate shaky cam.
Okay.
I hate found footage movies. I didn't like them with Blair Witch. I went to a press screening of Blair Witch before it opened. And the first thing I said is, I hate this movie. I liked that. I liked what they were building to in the movie, and then they pull the rug out from underneath you at the end, which is fine. It was just the whole found footage thing was not. I was just not interested in it, right? So that was strike.
You think it would have helped the movie if they would have showed the monster a little sooner and better and
no.
better?
No. It was just the shaky cam. Number one, the shaky cam, right? Put me off. The main thing is the first rule of drama was broken in any story a story that's written, television, books, movies, whatever. And that rule is you have to care about the characters or you have no drama. I hated every single character in that film. That whole lifestyle of yuppie kids, I've never liked them. I never liked that yuppie lifestyle.
I disagree with that first rule of drama, man. Big time.
Well,
There's a lot of
disagree.
films I like where I don't like any of the characters.
Yeah, well,
Midsommar is a great example of that.
Right. Well, you can disagree with that all you want, but it's an actual rule of drama. Whether one likes it or not is completely different. That's not my opinion. The rule is that drama is you have to care about the characters in a narrative. My take on that, my opinion is I didn't like the characters because of that rule. Not that the rule is fallible. Obviously, people can I like movies that have characters that are not that great in it, like Faster Pussycat Kill Kill by Russ Meyer. Every character is not a sympathetic character in that movie. They're all bad people, and I like that movie. Another movie I really like, and I like all the bad characters in it, is Jack Hill's Spider Baby. All the characters, they're cannibals. Night of the Living Dead at least has two characters you care about. But everybody else in the house, there's only really one bad guy in the house in Night of the Living Dead. But I didn't like Cloverfield because I couldn't find somebody to be sympathetic to. I didn't care whether anybody lived or died. And I mean, even like the rule of disaster movies is you got to kind of care about somebody in it. And it's basically a disaster movie setup like The Towering Inferno or Poseidon Adventure, Or then you get into movies like Swarm, Irwin Allen's Swarm. These are all Irwin Allen movies I quoted, where you just want everyone to get stung. Just sting everybody and let's all go home. I finished my popcorn. Let's all go home. I don't begrudge anyone that likes Cloverfield. You can like Cloverfield. You can go, here's why I like it. It can contradict my opinion on it. My opinion is not God's word. My opinion is just my own personal opinion. And that movie bugged me, and I just never liked it. So other people dig it. That's great, because I like movies that other people hate. I grew up with people going, you're an idiot for liking Godzilla movies. My entire childhood I was being told, you like stupid movies, you're an idiot.
Oh God, who did? Who among
Who tells
us?
a kid that?
Yeah, well,
Who tells
no,
a kid like you have stupid taste, you fucking kid? That's
yeah, but
weird.
who among us didn't have that? I mean, the same thing happened to when I was watching Godzilla movies. Yeah, we rushed home at 3:30 to watch them all, but then we get the adults saying, "Are you watching that again? That's so Can't, don't you want to watch something else? Why are you watching Godzilla again?"
Yeah.
We all got that.
It was worse. I got racist comments. Racist comments aimed at the Japanese.
Oh yeah. I heard.
The 1970s was only 30 years after the war. So there were a lot of adults who lived through the Pacific War, that were friends of my parents or whatever, and they would they would let their feelings be shared even though they weren't asked for.
Yeah. I got that when I was younger too. I got a few.
One of the things was even critics in newspapers would say this movie has "Made in Japan" stamped all over it, which at that time, "Made in Japan" was synonymous with cheap products, because the first stuff that came out of Japan after the war, the country that was completely leveled, and their entire industry was destroyed because they were military targets. They were making cheap tin toys out of American food cans that were given to people by the American occupation, and they were taking the empty tin cans and making toys out of them, and those would get exported. So if you opened up old Japanese tin toys that came over in the 40s and 50s, the late 40s and 50s, if you open them up, which they're super expensive toys, you can't really, they're worth a lot of money now, so you can't take them apart. But if you did, they would be like a can of fish or Alpo dog food or something. So Japan was synonymous until the late 60s. Japan was pretty much synonymous with made in Japan being cheap, until Sony was able to finally break through and sell their products in the United States to make people. They had to open up a showroom on Park Avenue in Manhattan to get their products on the market. Nobody wanted to import any Japanese products. So around the same time, the Japanese were able to break through on the car market in the United States, because young people who were going to college wanted to buy cars, but the standard American car was too expensive. So the Japanese made cheaper cars. And so you could buy a Japanese car or a VW Bug a lot cheaper than you could buy a car from like a GM or Ford or Chevrolet. So at that point, the Japanese cars became appreciated, and then Japanese electronics, like Sony was pushing radios and televisions. I'm sorry?
I was gonna say, how much of I mean, okay, when Godzilla first premiered in 1954, I mean, I guess was Godzilla initially a symbolism of anti-imperialism? I mean, did he represent us here in America because he rampaged over everybody?
No.
Okay.
There's no anti-American. There's no anti-American sentiment in Godzilla, because the director of Ishiro Honda was also the co-writer of the screenplay. So, he wrote it with Takeo Murata, another screenwriter. But Honda was sort of it was his script basically. He was drafted into World War II, and it was sent to the front in Manchuria. And it was against his will. He didn't want to be there, but hey, it's being locked up in a prison or shot or going to the front were your choices. That's what he did. He came back without losing anyone in his platoon. He was a platoon leader. But when the Japanese POWs came back after the end of the war, the Americans made sure that all the POWs had to go through Hiroshima on the way back to wherever they were going in Japan. So they would see the might of America, that we had created one bomb that could blow up an entire city. So Honda was shocked by this. He was already he was an artist and a liberal, and a lot of liberals, and I'm talking about like, free thinkers and people who were, like the whole proletariat thing and more, I don't want to get into politics, but people with a wide variety of politics, that were artists that generally fall under the category of artist, were against the war anyway. They knew that what Japan's military government was doing was wrong, and they didn't agree with it. A lot of people who dissented the war when it was happening were locked up or disappeared, never to be heard of again. Wow. So you come back, Honda was a pacifist, sees this destruction and said, I have just witnessed the end of mankind by passing through Hiroshima. So he wanted to make a statement also about war in general. It wasn't specifically Hiroshima, but that war will lead to the eventual destruction of all mankind. So he has said explicitly in interviews that Godzilla was his incarnation of war. It's war. Godzilla is war incarnate.
Oh, wow.
Not atomic war, not something, but all war.
So but if that's the case, and obviously it is, so how did it go where Godzilla was seen as initially as a bad creature, then toward the middle of the, as later movies progressed, he became more of a, more of a friendly, he defended Japan, he was defending humankind. How did that change happen? I mean, right. what was the catalyst to that?
Right. So they decided they did the sequel film where Godzilla's pretty much, Godzilla. And then they got to King Kong versus Godzilla, and Honda said, well, why don't this is part of Toho's 50th anniversary celebration of films. There was a whole slate of films, big budget films being made for the 50th anniversary, and King Kong versus Godzilla was one of them. They said, well, we should make this movie as an entertainment piece. We shouldn't be downbeat. It shouldn't be, dark and gritty. So let's make this entertainment film for the general audience. And Toho was mostly known for making movies about the middle class and light comedies and romances, and they did action movies and samurai type films and whatnot. But they said, let's not be too dour. Let's make, a light entertainment movie out of this. And then Honda said, well, why don't we do a satire of advertising and how advertising has become gone out of control in Japan, which was something that was happening where you had all these rival companies competing for ratings on television, where they would do really insane publicity stunts to draw attention to their products and to their television programs that they sponsored. And that's basically how that film was constructed. So that kind of shifted. Godzilla still is the heavy in that movie, but there's comedic bits, and one play with that is Tsuburaya, when they were deciding on how the monsters would be played and fight. The guy who played Kong, and the guy who played Godzilla were both saying, hey, why don't we play on something that was popular on television in Japan at the time, which was pro wrestling. So they said, let's play all the fights like pro wrestling, and went to Tsuburaya and said, hey, we got ideas that, we could do some like body slams and some, we could do a couple suplexes, and Tsuburaya thought it was hilarious and said, let's do it, because Tsuburaya liked to have fun and wanted to do some fun stuff. You go to the next movie and Godzilla's serious again, Mothra versus Godzilla in '64. But they kind of decided, like, okay, if we keep playing this character as like the evil character in every movie where his personality doesn't change, audiences are going to get pretty tired of this pretty quick,
Okay.
you could say yeah, or you could say no, but they were trying to gauge audiences, and they said, well, let's shift him to be more not necessarily a hero, but we can start moving him towards being sort of an anti-hero. There were also things that were going on socially in Japan and the world, which also influenced what they were doing. They were hitting on topical things and moving in that direction. And so, but there is a straight line of division when we get to the late 60s. So pretty much Godzilla is still played as a heavy, but they reframe him slightly in movies like Ghidorah, the Three-Headed Monster, or Monster Zero, where he's not a hero, he's not protecting humanity, but he ends up de facto, by default, getting rid of the bad monster. You get to Destroy All Monsters in 1968.
That's a great movie.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah,
and what they did is they said, well, you know what, these movies, everybody's watching television. There were television shows like Ultraman and the show that preceded it, Ultra Q, which is a black and white kind of like it's almost like mini Toho monster movies, weekly, 30-minute episodes.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that on Ultra Q because Subara, so I'm killing that name, but he's the one that created that show. It was produced by his company, he founded. So we get to Destroy All Monsters, right? And when they decided to produce this movie, because a lot of stuff was shifting to television, just like it was happening in America a few years before, everybody's going to TV. Hollywood's struggling with getting people in theaters. Same thing happened in Japan. It's the post-war era. People want new things. The audience's tastes are changing. And so they decided, well, Destroy All Monsters is going to be the last Godzilla movie. And they announce it to the media. This is the last Godzilla movie. We're going to hang up all the monster suits. This is it. And they weren't lying. That was the original thought. But what happened was monster TV shows started, like Ultra Q and Ultraman, were getting bigger and bigger. And they said, well, you know what? We were making all these movies for the general audience. And we were early, Toho was searching for like demographics for some of the films. A kind of a rudimentary demographics. Like, let's gear this, like Son of Godzilla. Let's gear this to women and children. Before it was like Godzilla versus the Sea Monster was aimed 1966. That was aimed at late teens and early college freshmen, co-eds, because it was set in a tropical setting. And at the time in Japan, Hawaii and the South Pacific was very, very trendy in Japan at the time. So we're going to do this movie, Godzilla movie, that's set in the beautiful, romantic South Pacific, and all the college-age people are going to come and see it. And the co-feature for Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster was a movie about college co-eds going to Hawaii. That was the co-feature. So they were purposely aiming it at different audience types. So they were, still like losing audiences for most of their movies. So they said, hey, let's take a break and put these movies away. And then someone said, well, okay, hey, why don't we do this? Another studio, a rival to Toho, Toei, is doing a series of kiddie matinees. And they're doing these kiddie matinee packages where they're taking some of their TV cartoons and putting them together with a feature film. And it's a 3-hour package where the parents can drop you off at the theater and go do shopping without their kids bugging them the whole time. So Toho said, let's do what they're doing because these are popular. And one of the films that Toei, this other rival studio, produced with MGM in America was The Green Slime. And that was one of their kiddie matinee packages. So Toho said, well, we could do that, but why don't we turn Godzilla into a kid's star? Why don't we aim Godzilla movies at children now? Like Daiei did with their Gamera movies, right?
Which were almost out of the gate kiddie movies,
right?
Especially with the third movie on, it was all geared towards children. And they said we could come back and try to reframe that, and then we could have these kiddie matinee packages, so we can make a short movie, and then we can package all these cartoons or short live action subjects, like an Ultraman episode, and put it together as a package that was called the Toho Champion Festival. And so all the 1970s movies, the ones that Americans would go, because out of context, go like, was Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster really aimed for general audiences?
Yeah,
was Godzilla vs. Megalon actually, produced for like, adults, and it's like, no, these were all made for kiddie matinee packages. So no matter how violent they are, people go, well, but they're really bloody. There's some in the uncut versions, they're bloody. There's lots of blood and there's lots of violence. I go, well, that was more permissible in Japan, which is not a Judeo-Christian culture. Right. So the boundaries for children's entertainment in Japan was completely different. I saw a cartoon from Japan when I was 10 years old, and it had a scene where a mom is sitting on a bench in a park breastfeeding her kid. And I went, wow, it's a cartoon booby.
Well, I remember the first time I got shocked by a Japanese kid cartoon was watching the old Robotech series, and they showed the main characters getting automatized. Yeah, I was like, what?
Yeah, and like that the part of Macross or part of Robotech, which was Dimensional Fortress Macross, that's the one with the planes that transform into the robots, right? Right. So that series was aimed at anime at the time of the early 80s, was pretty much all being aimed at college age people. It wasn't really being made for kids. There were still cartoons, or what we call cartoons, being aimed for children in Japan, but they had a new demographic to aim at that made anime popular. And so that, like Gundam, the original Mobile Suit Gundam, was a complete failure. It was a financial and ratings disaster. The series was originally supposed to be 52 episodes. The networks and the sponsor said, we're not selling any toys. No one is watching this show. We're cutting you down to 43 episodes. Deal with it. So they wrapped up the story with 43 episodes. The creator of the show, Yoshiyuki Tomino, was unhappy with one episode, and that is permanently banned from any overseas sales. So if you see Gundam in the United States or France or England or anywhere else in the world, it's only 42 episodes, not 43. And then what happened was a massive, like it happened with Star Trek a decade earlier, it was a massive letter writing campaign by college students and young, like high school seniors and college students who watched the series and thought it was great and saw the worth in this show that was aimed at kids. I mean, the network put it on a time slot and marketed it to children, but the people that were the show was written and produced for older people, an older demographic, and they're the people that it connected with, but it wasn't enough to keep the show on the air. And so there's a massive letter writing campaign. They said, let's get a better time slot on a better night. Same thing that happened to Star Trek, how it got murdered in the third season by being switched to Friday nights. And people flocked to Gundam. It blew up. The toy company that had bungled the toy sales for Gundam in the first place was a company called Clover. And then Bandai did some model kits. So Bandai ramped up all the model kits. The model kits were selling like hotcakes, and Bandai was able to get the contract for all the toys away from Clover. And then Tomino, who created Gundam, went and said, hey, you know how we can make this Gundam bigger is I wanted we can make a feature film out of the episodes and put some new animation. And the Japanese studio, Shochiku, who wanted to distribute it, said, yeah, we just want one movie. You go, no, it's a trilogy or you get nothing. So he talked them into doing a trilogy. So they broke down the main arcs of the 42 episodes into 3 over 2-hour feature films, and Gundam became a phenomenon, which we're still, dealing with today with new series, and that like an unbroken chain since the early 80s now, really. Yeah, I don't know the whole point of that, but I gave you a whole Gundam history.
I guess it's the same sort of thing with. Let me put my thought here together. So after Godzilla switched over, like I said, there was Log Monster or whatnot. I guess that's when he, became kid friendly. Now, didn't the kid friendly one almost kill the franchise overall though? Because It alienated the. I mean,
no, not really, because now what we have to remember is like people will cite, that we have access to the box office numbers for the 70s movies. And a lot of American fans, and it's not their fault, but a lot of American fans over the years, last 25 years or so, have used that up and down chart of ticket sales. Like the most ticket selling Godzilla movie in history of those original films in Japan was King Kong versus Godzilla, and everything was downhill after that, so to speak.
wow.
The one thing that's different, though, is, see, it doesn't take into account the same thing that happened in the United States, where the studios, unlike in America in the 50s and 60s and 70s, the Japanese studios still owned their theater chains. So Toho movies played in Toho theaters, Daiei movies played in Daiei theaters, and the companies were like getting their lower and lower ticket sales overall for all movies, and as people migrated to television, so they started going, we're going to close theaters to maximize the existing theaters we have. So there were less theaters to see these movies in. The audiences were already shrinking, so you could see the math based on the context. So kiddie matinees are only shown during the day. So you can't go, I'm going to go and see that kiddie matinee at 6 o'clock as an adult. So these matinees were 3 hours long. They maybe got 2 screenings out of them a day, because these packages were like 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours. So, you have, like early morning, and then maybe these things were only making money when kids weren't in school. And in Japan, kids are in school. In those days, in the 70s, kids went to school 6 days a week. You went to school Monday through Saturday. Sunday was your only day off, right? So that reduced the amount of time people could go to theaters. These things were scheduled seasonally, per season. So the Toho Champion festivals happened, like spring, summer, fall, winter, right? And then they would try to have them open on a holiday, right? Like you would in the United States or anywhere else. So, but there's smaller numbers of people going, because you've already cut the adults out, and they were made for that, because they were produced for far less money. They were engineered from the bottom up to be kiddie matinee movies. So
okay. So with obviously they made less and less films, right? Obviously, what's the last?
Well, they did. You have to look at it this way: if they were able to go forward with starting in 1969, Godzilla's Revenge was the first of the kiddie matinee movies. It's a kids movie, and a lot of people misunderstand that movie because it's a children's fantasy, and it's an excellent children's fantasy. If a 40-year-old tries to watch it seriously,
they're going to
hate it.
Right.
But the context is it's basically the kaiju version of the Wizard of Oz.
Sort of like a timeout in the series. It's sort of like a timeout in the series. Like, okay, here we're doing serious. Now we're going to take time out. We're going to push this clip movie, basically what it was. We're going to push that out there. The kids will love it. Hopefully, they'll get a bunch of new fans will be developed from it, and then it goes back to the Monster Zero and destroying the monsters.
Right. What they were also doing with this package is they were taking the older Godzilla movies and cutting them down to about 60 minutes a piece and putting them into these festivals too. So Godzilla's Revenge was the first one that was an original production, and then they've made enough money for them to keep going for 5 more years. Producing a new Godzilla movie 5 years consecutive. So Godzilla's Revenge, that feature, that whole package, that whole matinee package, for that supporting Godzilla's Revenge was made enough money to keep each film going. Each one made enough money to keep the next one going. The audiences started going down, and then they had their swan song in 75, but they still did that package till 77, I think. For 2 more years they continued, but they did them I think biannually by that point. So they weren't just overall doing well, whether they had Godzilla in them or not.
So, now, the last original movie before Shin Godzilla, that was what, Godzilla 2000? Or
Oh
was
no,
that,
oh no, there were a few. There were a few after Godzilla 2000.
was the Final Wars 2000, like 2004, 2005, and then
Yeah.
Shin Godzilla?
Right,
Okay.
right, yeah.
Okay.
Final Wars.
How did yeah, that was a badass movie.
Oh, it's bad, all right. I know people love it. I saw it at the world premiere. God, it sounds like a freaking brag show. I saw it I was invited to the world premiere in Los Angeles. At a lot of Toho gave out tickets to everybody. It wasn't just me. They were anyway. They had like some of the actors there. The saving grace of that movie is Dawn, the Predator.
Oh yeah, Godzilla, yeah.
He's like the saving grace of that movie. I mean, seeing that movie, I know how people like it because most people's experience with that movie is seeing the DVD or seeing it on cable television or whatever, and on your home screen, all the effects look fine, but seeing that thing on a 150-foot screen in a theater was like, I've seen all the modern Godzilla movies in a theater first experience. Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, Tokyo SOS. I saw all of them every year in a theater at some kind of a screening. And well, that's fine. That looks okay. That looks good. Those effects are passable. They could play on, and if they distributed this theatrically in the United States, that could do good. But when I saw the opening moments of Final Wars, was like seeing something right out of the 70s. I mean, you could see the wires on everything. It was like, then the director purposely said he wanted all the effects to look like it was made in the 70s. So I was expecting a certain level that Toho was maintaining at that point, and then they did this thing, and I was just like, the opening scene, I'm sitting there like this, just looking through my fingers, going like, oh my God. And then sitting across from me in the next aisle is Steven Seagal, who wouldn't get off his cell phone.
Shit.
Toho invited all these Hollywood people. They invited Steven Seagal. The collar on his jacket was choking him. He came with a hooker and a bodyguard.
That's funny as hell.
And he spent most of the time on the cell phone, left and walked out halfway through the movie. So,
because
Steven Seagal, if you're out there, you're rude. You're rude.
So then Shin Godzilla came out in
Right.
2000. Now did that get warmly received in Japan, or was that just like?
It did better than the past 25 years of movies.
Okay.
It really connected with the average Japanese person. Most of the previous, like the Heisei movies, did fairly well. Children, Toho tried to get everybody to go. So they marketed things to children. They added like little cartoons that would be played with the movie in theaters just to get the kids in there. The movies were kind of aimed at the mid-range, teen to adult, level. And they did fairly well to keep going, until they had to stop. The only reason why they stopped making them is so TriStar could make their movie. How have
the two Godzilla movies been received in Japan?
Which are the two American movies?
Yeah, Godzilla and Godzilla King of the Monsters.
Right.
How have they been received?
There's a lot of Japanese, like fans, like name Japanese fans that enjoyed the movies. They're looking forward to Kong. They're kind of the Japanese have always been very aware and impressed by the technical achievements that American films can do that their film industry won't do, because their film industry doesn't want to spend that kind of money. I mean, Japan is a country that can set inside the entirety of California You can or rather, I should say, you can fit the entirety of Japan inside of California with lots of room to spare, and they just can't generate the same kind of box office that Hollywood movies can. So therefore, the producers there, anytime they make any kind of special effects movie, it's considered an extreme risk financially, and that could end a studio or end somebody's career as a producer if it fails. So they're very cautious, and they really don't like making these movies unless they're going to be profitable. And they're rarely profitable stateside. They only pick up in Japan domestically, and will only pick up maybe some box office in other countries. But they're still not really completely sure about Godzilla's popularity outside of Japan in terms of, like, they know they sell toys and they sell products well, but films earning big box offices, I think Toho has really sort of unrealistic expectations of what these movies should be making overseas. Shin Godzilla was received well overseas by most people who saw it, most people that reviewed it. Japan did like a phenomenally well, where you had people doing a Star Wars thing, where people went multiple times to see the movie. And to underline the whole point of whether it was received well, it won the Japanese Academy Award for Best Picture.
Oh, I did not know that. Really?
It won several awards for technical effects and Best Picture because it addressed subjects in the film that were current Japanese fears, very similar to the 1954 film did, which was the earthquake 10 years ago in Fukushima and the tsunami and the Fukushima atomic plant, the nuclear power plant disaster. That was because that happened in 2011.
It's still going on.
And then Godzilla came out in 2016. So it's a very hot button issue still at that point. And also it addressed things where, yes, this film also had some stuff. It had some finger wagging. For the first time in the history, the blatant finger wagging at the United States, which was that, Japan is on America's short leash. We should make decisions for ourselves. We should decide our fate. We should protect our own country. Those are things that are discussed in Shin Godzilla. And there's no subtext. You don't have to read footnotes. It's like right in the dialogue, man. It's it's acted out in scenes in bad English spoken by amateur actors on screen, playing the American characters. Very ham-fisted dialogue too, and it's that really kind of took me out of the movie when it's like, you can hire like real actors if you wanted to, instead of just getting guys from a modeling agency. And we need a 50-year-old man who kind of looks like he might be a general, and can you act? We don't care. Can you read this dialogue? Sure, I can read it. Can you memorize it? Sure.
That probably had to do what you said earlier about the budget. They probably put all their money into the effects and just did nothing on the cast.
They had a bad moment with that movie, which was in production wise. They had planned to combine CG with practical effects, and they were going to do a Godzilla suit, and they built this big prosthetic animatronic Godzilla, just like the Queen Alien in Aliens, and just as big. All of the footage they shot was considered unusable because it didn't work the way they wanted it to. So they spent half of their effects budget building stuff they had to throw away.
That brings me up to one other question, if you don't mind. What happened to the original suits, like the Godzilla suit?
Well, those things, like foam rubber, rots very quickly. So all that stuff was thrown out.
So none of the original suits exist today.
Oh no, because even if somebody put them somewhere, to keep them preserved with the technology of the time in the 50s and 60s, they wouldn't last. One of the only surviving props that is known in a private collection in Japan is a Godzilla puppet head. There's two, I think, that exist. There's a Godzilla puppet head from Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, which if you pick it up crumbles to dust. I have some original Japanese suit props. I have a couple of monsters from a couple of Japanese TV shows in my living room, which I keep getting told to throw out, that are crumbling to dust, basically. And they were made in the 80s, and they're like, you pick them up, and if you grab them, I don't know if you can see that, but if you just like grab the arm of it or the hand of it or something like that, I don't think and you just touch it like that, it just crumbles. It just all turns into dust. It's all dried out. So there's a Godzilla head, but it's kept in, the Godzilla head is kept in like a plexiglass box. Nobody's allowed to touch it because it's gonna fall apart. It's like Dracula, it's like Christopher Lee at the end of Horror of Dracula. It's just gonna crumble to dust. And then somebody has an actual head, the head of a monster suit from Godzilla versus the Sea Monster, and it's in the same kind of condition. And somebody's got the head. The same guy who's got the Sea Monster head has the puppet head of Kong from King Kong Escapes. And there are probably other private collectors out there with more stuff, but they have to keep really low profile because Toho might come and go.
Yeah.
Okay, we're taking this back.
Yeah, Toho is actually very, very strict on YouTube. You can't put clips up on anything. They get taken down and you get a strike right away.
Right. Yeah, Toho's lawyers it's an American law firm, and they represent a lot of motion picture companies, and they're very thorough.
So Ben and Casey, do you have some questions, or because I only have one left before?
Can I finish that? Can I finish this question somebody asked about?
Sure.
I think I already answered it. Godzilla's Revenge. It's basically the Wizard of Oz. So it's basically a Wizard of Oz movie. I think it's a great children's movie. A lot of people will say it's Godzilla versus stock footage, but I think I think it uses its stock footage very well for what it is. Versus we have a direct comparison. A direct comparison is Godzilla versus Gigan in 1972, which contains about 40%. It's like 40% stock footage from previous movies disguised as new footage, and cut into the new footage, the battles of the new footage, and it intersperses the old footage with new footage from other movies. And it kind of drags the whole movie down. Yeah, it's got a lot of great long monster scenes, but like half of it is like, I felt that half of it is, let me finish that sentence, I should. It's like, I don't know what that sentence was going to be anymore, but kind of went away. But they should have just left that out, man. I know they were padding for running time to keep the movie at around 90 minutes or so. But I've always had a pet project in mind that I would cut out all the stock footage. Cut out all the stock footage, do a fan edit where it has all the stock footage just cut out, and you really just get, the new Godzilla footage in it. It would probably run about 60 minutes. Probably,
that's what they did with Godzilla versus Megalon. I remember when that came out. It came out on NBC, and they ran it for an hour. They ran the movie was for an hour when it premiered here.
Right, and that was including the segments with allegedly with John Belushi in the Godzilla suit, which he wasn't in the suit, but he did the voiceover. So Godzilla's changed. Went from bad guy to then in the 70s he became kind of a hero. He no longer purposely stepped on things, and he interacted with human beings in Godzilla versus Hedorah. It gives the military a look, kind of turns his head, goes, "Really?" At one point in the end. And then you have the Swan Song in 75, and then he comes back in Godzilla 1984, and a Return of Godzilla in 1984, and then that really was supposed to kickstart a whole new series of films, but it took them a little while to get that going. And then Biollante came out, which was a disappointment at the box office in Japan. Did very well opening weekend, and then kind of kind of trailed off, which is why it took a couple of years to put out Godzilla versus King Ghidorah in 1991. Toho was like, well, let's just, let's do another Godzilla movie, but what didn't work with Biollante, let's figure out what didn't work with that movie, and let's see what people would like more. And they said their idea was original and new monster, no. What are Godzilla's most popular enemies? That'll get butts in seats. So it was King Ghidorah, Mothra, so they just brought back, and then Mechagodzilla. They just brought back new versions of the old popular rivals is what happened. So unfortunately, if Biollante had done really well at the box office, it would have been probably more original monsters interspersed with classics.
I guess they're going to do that again with Kong versus Godzilla. It looks like they're bringing back Mecha King Ghidorah. Oh my God! I don't know I really don't know what they're doing with that movie. The toy. I'm sure everybody's seen. If you already know that some of the toys have already hit like Walmart shelves, right? And there is a Mecha Godzilla that's going to be in the movie. Yeah. And it looks like a watch band with arms and legs. It just looks like a slinky toy. I don't like the design. And everybody's like, well, the toy looks one way. It's probably going to look totally cool on screen. And yeah, you have a point. You shouldn't make a final judgment until you see the final film and what the character looks like on screen. But conceptually, I already don't like that design, But I hope people like it. I hope people like the movie and that it does really well. I don't think we're going to see any more movies after this one because on this kind of a scale of the legendary pictures, because I think the pandemic, the repercussions of the pandemic has kind of changed the dynamics,
the way Hollywood makes movies now. Yeah. It's like if we're going to have less theaters for the next few years and less of an audience to actually go into theaters, they're not going to spend $200 million to make a movie anymore if they're not going to make $1 billion off of that movie. That's sort of like the litmus. It's like I think the last two big MCU films, like Endgame and Infinity War, were, I think their total budgets were in the $200 million range, right? Yeah. And of course, you need to recoup that. Everybody pushes. We need to make $1 billion. We need to make $1 billion at the box office worldwide. So the spending that $200 million, not maybe not including money for publicity, we recoup that investment. So I can't see them trying that with a Godzilla film in the future. I think they're going to scale back a lot. I think even the MCU movies might scale back somewhat. Definitely, a lot of the projects are being geared towards streaming platforms now. So we do have a new Godzilla animated series coming out of Japan that's coming to Netflix called Godzilla Singular Point. I don't know if you've seen much of that, or it's coming soon. I'm sorry?
I heard a little bit about that. I know they released a new Pacific Rim animated show too.
Right. I've seen it. I liked it. I think a lot of people will do things like, when they see things, it's like if you say, oh, I enjoyed that, I had a good time watching it. So it stinks. What do you mean? You're out of your mind. It's not as good as the first movie. It should be way better. It's like not everything is going to exceed the first thing that was made,
you go back to look at Godzilla. I mean, Godzilla 54 still holds up very, very well. It's still a very good movie, and it's like look how old it is, but it's still one of the top, probably one of the top 5 movies that they released out of the 30-something movies.
But I think anybody can enjoy whatever they want to. It's like Cloverfield. To come back to the Cloverfield problem, and Cloverfield has a lot of fans. And I can see why. I've seen the movie. I can see why people like it. I just didn't enjoy. I didn't enjoy it personally. Like I also liked the original Pacific Rim, and I liked Uprising. I loved Pacific Rim, and I liked Uprising. And some people liked Pacific Rim, and then went, Uprising sucks. Everybody has an opinion. Not everybody can like the same thing equally. It's like there are people now that don't like the original 1977 Star Wars as much as they do like maybe Revenge of the Sith,
right?
The prequel trilogy, and that's fine. I mean, I could sit here and go, why here? Let me make a diagram of why Revenge of the Sith blows. Let's take it apart as just in pure structure of being made as a motion picture. Besides, and let's break apart the narrative, and let's break apart this and that, and let's also emphasize, the last shot in the movie. No,
right.
And I saw it on opening night at midnight with a packed theater. Again, you had to wait in line to get a good seat, and the theater's packed full of Star Wars fans. And when Vader comes off, when they do the Bride of Frankenstein with Vader, and he just comes off the slab and goes, no, the entire theater erupted in laughter. Everybody laughed. And I sat there and went, I was the only one who didn't laugh. I went, oh my God. What happened?
I know it's getting late, so let me have this test for the last question for you. Would you say it's fair that Godzilla is Japan's Star Wars? How it's looked at? It's kind of a hard equivalent, that Godzilla at one time was very, very popular, and Godzilla has pretty much fallen into the realm in Japan of being what an American equivalent would be something like, that's your daddy's monster movie. So it's really considered, what the Japanese call it is like, it's uncle's movie, or it's dad's movie. This is something for the older generation that's not hip. Godzilla is not hip in Japan. It's not. He's not hip. He's nowhere as popular as Ultraman. Ultraman and what the equivalent Japanese Power Rangers shows, Super Sentai, those are what's really popular. Godzilla is not popular. Godzilla belongs to old people. Wow. Okay.
Even when they tried to re-envision Godzilla for younger audiences, with the animated Godzilla trilogy from a couple years ago, that you can watch on Netflix. Those failed at the box office. Singular Point is another try at giving this series to a young group of animators and writers to produce something that's going to connect with younger people and maybe create a new fan base for Godzilla with a younger fan base. But who knows? It may not connect with anyone at all, and it may not connect. One of the recent Japanese animated series that did connect with younger Japanese people was imported to the United States and did appeal to fans and drew some new fans in from an animated series based on a live action property. In the 90s, there was a series distributed in America called Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad. And it was a rival to Power Rangers, and it was based on a TV show that had been made in the early 90s by Subaraya Productions, the guys who made Ultraman, called Gridman. And so they did an animated sequel for Gridman called Gridman SSSS, Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad, but they never spell that out. And that resonated really well with young fans, not only in the United States, but also in Japan. And a sequel series is out now. And that has kind of breached that thing where one of the characters is a kaiju nerd and buys the plastic toys and has them in a cabinet. They
There's a lot of
so
us there for that.
that's seen some success of popularity with younger people. Cross that bridge where the older fans like it and the younger fans found it appealing. But Godzilla is pretty much the realm of the past, and they just kind of make these old movies. They kind of make new movies that basically try to appeal to try to get those 40 to 50-year-old demo to come and see them.
Right.
And like I said, Shin Godzilla did fantastically well, and was an Academy Award winning movie, Japanese Academy Award winning movie. So you figure, why didn't they just follow that up and kind of like follow that success? And it's because that movie was meant entirely as a one shot. So
Right.
the director and writer for that movie is a guy named Shinji Higuchi, not Shinji Higuchi, but was Hideaki Anno, who was the creator of an animated series that's popular all over the world called Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Yep.
And after he finished, he said Toho did they begged him to make Shin Godzilla. They begged him to make his own Godzilla movie. And he only did it under the condition as it's one and done, because I have to finish my Evangelion movie series, which is just released in Japan and has broken all box office records.
Wow.
This guy talks about every time he finishes a new project, he's physically and mentally exhausted and can't think about making another movie for at least 2 years. So
it's so weird. It's so weird to see Godzilla's legacy go from his home, where he was huge, and now the pendulum has swung so much. Now he's massive internationally wise.
Right.
It's just. He's huge over here now in the States. Godzilla is huge. This movie's been talked about for well over 2-3 years. The Kong versus Godzilla. So it's just sort of weird now to see that dynamic.
Yeah. It's it's just a case that it's where the Japanese are just not really interested in this old pop culture character. So.
August, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, and wow, just a crazy. This is everything I hoped it would be. I just learned so much, and it's been great. It's been great. I'm definitely gonna try to find your book. I gotta find that book.
Yeah, it went out of print like late last year. So yeah, the prices have been kind of crazy, on that. On both editions, there was a hardcover edition that came out in 2007, and then we did an updated and revised softcover edition in 2014 to coincide with the first legendary Godzilla movie, Gareth Edwards' film.
Right.
And that finally went out of print. I think we had a total of 25,000 copies sold. So I hope the prices have come down, because with the new interest in Ultraman, with all the entire catalog, pretty much for all intents and purposes, the major catalog in that franchise is being released on Blu-ray here in the United States. That a lot of new fans have become Ultraman fanatics, and people are asking where they've discovered this book, and they want to read about it, because I go into how the Ultraman franchise was created, and unfortunately I can't give it to them. It's like that's totally up to my publisher at Chronicle Books if they want to do another edition of the book, and maybe it's time to write another one.
Yes, and we'll have you come back on. And we'll talk about Ultraman.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you. And remember, folks, parting words, like whatever movie you want to. It doesn't matter what I think. These are just opinions of what I like and don't like. If you don't like Godzilla's Revenge, that's fine. I love Godzilla's Revenge.
Yep.
I don't like Cloverfield, but if you love Cloverfield, love it. Love it to death.
Like what you like.
Like what you like, and don't let anyone's opinion sway you, and don't let anyone tell you you can't like it.
That's right. Thank you again, sir.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yep.
See you, August.
Cheers. Thanks again.
Thank you, August. Okay, Hobbs.
What is up, kids?
Chillaxing.
How we holding up?
Yeah. Oh, do you know how to get out, August? You just reverse your way out. How you came in? Okay.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Unless you want to stick around for us, we're just going to start talking. We're going to start talking. Talking topics. So if you want to stick around for that,
I'll
you
stick
can.
around. What the hell? I don't have a date tonight.
Let's talk the midnight hour. Ben and Casey, you're more than welcome to hang around if you guys want to.
Hang around for a bit. I'm going up to Sea Ranch tomorrow, and I do need to get packing for that at some point.
Okay.
I'll stick around for a bit.
All right.
I'm gonna head out, guys.
Thank you.
All right,
Casey.
Cheers.
Oh, let me step away from the mic for a minute. Hobbs, I'll be right back.
Okay.
Your picture is frozen, by the way, Patrick. Just in case you didn't know.
Oh, thank you, sir. Let me fix that.
Indeed. Reaper's Horror says you can also like movies that you know are bad just because they're bad. I certainly like some bad movies that I know are bad.
Yeah, it's like I love Plan 9 from Outer Space.
What's your favorite bad movie, do you think?
One of my all-time favorites is The Horror of Party Beach. Del Tenney, 1964.
It sounds good.
Love The Horror of Party Beach.
Yeah.
The Horror of Party Beach was trying to capitalize on the Frankie Avalon and Annette Funicello beach party movies that were being produced by American International. And the guy who did it, Del Tenney, was a Florida. Was he in Florida? Well, he's an East Coast filmmaker. Let's just say that. I don't want to get it wrong. He made a couple of genre pictures, but Horror Party Beach is basically like these atomic mutations, and they're called zombies in the movie. They're made out of dead bodies that were at the bottom of the bottom of the bay, and they come up. They're reanimated by nuclear waste dumped into the bay, and they come out and they're really ridiculous looking monsters, and they come out of the bay and attack women, drink your blood. And it's got rock and roll in it. It's got a motorcycle gang, it's got everything happens at the beach, and it's just crazy. It was ranked one of the worst movies of all time back in the 80s.
Have you seen Nightmare Beach?
Nightmare Beach, I'm not recalling anything.
That's another one that's like a I want to say mid to late 80s spring break slasher movie with a motorcycle gang at Fort Lauderdale.
Cool. Yeah.
It's pretty bad, but it's fun.
Yeah, I like Blood Beach.
I have not seen it.
It's the monster. The monster lives in the sand and attacks people at a boardwalk. It's great. And then you have
Blood Beach is pretty good with John Saxon.
Which one?
Is that the one with John Saxon?
John Saxon's in Blood Beach. Yeah.
Is he? He's in Nightmare Beach too.
Yeah. He's a cop.
Is he in both?
Wow.
John Saxon did anything in those days.
He's got
Just
some
give me a
range,
job.
man.
Yeah, man. Starting with Queen of Blood, in the 60s, and all the way to
all the way up to
Elm Street.
Yeah.
Wasn't he in The Dark? That was another early 80s, monster from space with laser eyes.
John Saxon did one of the best movies ever when he did Battle Beyond the Stars.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think Nightcaller from Outer Space he did in England. Is another one that he did. And of course, Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee.
That's right.
So John Saxon, another great Italian American.
Black Christmas.
Yep. He also did man. He did Gene Roddenberry's one of his last project, I think.
Like Earth 2. There was Earth 2.
Yep.
It was one of those two TV movies. I get them confused. There's Earth 2, and then there's Genesis.
Yeah, the Earth.
Something.
Alex Cord did the first one,
Right.
And then John Saxon did the second one.
Right. I kind of like the second one because it also had Richard Kiel in it. Not Richard Kiel. It had John Cassidy. The other Ted Cassidy.
Yeah, that
Lurch.
was John Saxon.
Yeah, Lurch was in that. I'm trying to think whatever. There's so many, like, I lost track of a lot of 80s movies. I've been trying to catch up on, a lot of 80s movies during the pandemic. Staying home, don't go anywhere, and crossing off a lot of stuff with classics from the 50s and 60s genre films that either didn't play on TV out here when I was a kid and a young adult, or just weren't in the packages, or I missed them. Like, they were on television before I started watching monster movies incessantly. So I've been trying to catch up on a lot of those, and some are okay. I just saw, now I can't even remember that damn name of the movie. It's The Unknown Island. It's another lost dinosaur, plateau of dinosaurs movie with Cesar Romero as the star.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like quality right there.
It has stop motion animation in it. All the dinosaurs are done in stop motion. It's very shaky stop motion, but I give them a lot of points for doing stop motion instead of sticking a guy in a suit.
That's the one that Casey was just talking about. I think he just reviewed that, wasn't it?
Oh, really?
I think it was. Isn't that the one he just reviewed, guys?
I would have to go double check.
Yeah, the plot is they're looking for this missile that went off course, and there's something in the missile that they need to have, to make a better missile, and so they fly to this island, but it's got this. It's the island is made out of pure uranium. The plane loses control. They crash. They have to go. The rocket ends up crashing on this plateau. They have to go across. So it's jungle picture. They go through the jungle to get to the plateau. Then it's a mountain climbing movie. And they climb the mountain. They lose one guy on the way up, of course. They get to the plateau, and then it's all dinosaurs.
Oh yeah, Earth 2 was a good series too. That came out on NBC during the 80s. It had such a good start. The pilot came out really strong, and then it got super cheesy real quick. But that happened a lot.
Oh yeah, like the Fantastic Journey, and was that 1977 or something?
Yeah, Jared Martin and
Roddy McDowall.
Yeah, Roddy McDowall, and that was a great show.
Yeah, it only ran 10 episodes.
Carl Franklin was in it. He became a very good director.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they also had a couple of English directors that did mostly movies before that. But yeah, that was a series that was all set for success, and somehow it just had the plug pulled. It's like the Westworld TV series nobody remembers.
Oh, I remember.
Beyond Westworld.
Yeah, 5 episodes at last.
Yeah. And I guess by watching the pilot, I know why they yanked it. They should have yanked it before 4 weeks. They should have yanked it on the first week.
Oh my God, that was a bad series. They put Connie Selica in that.
Yeah, poor Connie Selica.
What do you guys think of the new Westworld?
Yeah. First they stuck her in a movie with a giant turtle and her lives, the Bermuda Depths, and then they make her go beyond Westworld. Poor gal.
What's the movie, Ben?
The new Westworld series.
I have not watched it yet. I had the first 2 seasons.
I watched both. What is it? 2 seasons? 3?
I think they're
three.
I think
3.
Yeah.
I think that they lost me with the third one, but
I watched the first season was good.
Yeah, first season's really solid.
I haven't gotten into the second season yet. But yeah, first season was excellent, man. Really well made. Good cast.
Yeah, it was really pretty stellar, Kept you guessing, but then I think I don't know what happened. A lot of people turned on it. A lot of people turned on that. I think
what happens is I think it takes so long for these damn shows to come on the air. It's like, they're only making 10 episodes or 12 episodes per season, but it's not the same. It's like you have to wait practically almost a whole damn year to get it. And by that time, people's attention spans are shot.
Right. You know, and then plus people, I think that long period of time between seasons, so to speak, is that because they're not really seasons. You skipped about 3 seasons, but people's expectations grow in their head so much about what's going to happen next that they kind of build their own head canon of what's going to happen, and it only sets up for disappointment. And it's not the fault of the viewer; it's the fault of them not just going right into another season or staggering the production in a way where you don't have to wait a year plus to get the next season of 8 episodes or whatever the hell it is. I mean,
Yeah.
look at the first season of Star Trek. I think it's like 39 episodes in 1 year, and then you had a summer break, and that was it. The show would, you run out of the show by like May or June would be the end of the season, and then you would have the summer months off, and it would be reruns.
Right.
And then September, the new season would start.
So the show would only keep the show in the public's eye.
Yeah, and I mean, every TV show did that in the United States for decades, until somebody found a way to decided we could do less and get more, and we'll make them wait longer periods of time. It's kind of a shame.
It is a shame. I mean, now with streaming services being what they are, it's like if you don't miss it, if you miss it, then you can just go on and grab a streaming service and catch up. But
right.
But that's, I guess you could keep a show in the public's eye that way. But when you're only making 10 episodes and you're binge watching it, it's over quick.
Yeah.
And there's so many options out there now. There's so many options out there now that you're, now you have to, watch something else.
Yeah, people are consuming the material too fast, which I thought was one way. I mean, you get easily hooked and sucked in to go, I got to see what happens next. Now it's like 6 a.m, and you're like, I got to watch one more. I'm going to call in sick at work, or whatever, but it becomes all a blur then, because, you're going in like 6 or 8 hours continuous, and then everything kind of becomes a blur. You don't have time to, have that marinate, what you just watched in that one episode marinate, like we used to. You'd watch one episode and go, wow, that's great, I can't wait till next week. And of course, then go ahead.
Now the seasons are like an episode, so you just the cycle is different, right? Now it's like the whole season is an episode, and then you have to marinate for a year until the next episode.
Yeah, and maybe and you might lose interest in that time. So.
You might, but there's some properties that are really demanding people's attention. Like Game of Thrones was one, and Stranger Things has a big following.
Right,
Cobra Kai, another one.
And they're behind on Stranger Things because of the pandemic, and these things are being put off. So where they're being put off because of other circumstances, but then people start losing interest, and audiences, tastes change very quickly. The audience can be very fickle sometimes. I mean, I think it was really brilliant, of Amazon to do The Expanse once weekly, starting with this second to last, the penultimate season. The next season's the last, and because I binged the previous ones, and then I had to rewatch them again to remember things that I had forgotten. I think it's great that they did that. I think it's great that the Disney Plus is doing the same thing with their Star Wars shows, like The Mandalorian, the first one out of the gate, and WandaVision, and the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So I think it makes people maybe appreciate what they're watching a little more. And if people don't like it being given to them once a week, they can just wait till it's over. I mean, they only have to wait like 6 or 8 weeks, and then they can binge them all they want. From there.
But, I mean, taking it back to the beginning of this discussion was Westworld on HBO, and HBO always does, episodic things on a weekly basis for its series.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely. But now it's gotten to the point where people, in just a short span of time, since that the first season of Westworld or Game of Thrones, that people are just like, I want to binge it now. You know, they don't want to wait. And I mean, I saw there were negative reviews on Amazon for The Expanse just due to the fact that you're making me wait, so therefore I'm giving this series 1-star review.
Oh, you can't take any reviews on Amazon seriously.
Yeah.
They'll review a product for it arriving damaged, you know, or like.
Oh yeah, it's the same thing. Well, you know, it's like, but it's not so much the review. This is how people think now. This is a preponderance of people that want what they want right now, and they want to binge it all, and they don't care, and they get pissy if they can't have it all now. Audiences' taste change, man. And you know, it's like forcing audiences to wait once a week is almost breaking some people's spirits, which shows what kind of a sad, entitled culture we live in right now.
Well, and you know, people are conditioned to have everything at their fingertips whenever they want, as far as like music and movies and all that stuff goes anyway. So
right, and no one wants to pay for anything.
Well, that is true too. Yeah.
How does this stuff get made? You know, it's like this, you know, it exists and people think this way, just doesn't make it right. Or you know, I feel sorry for some people that are like that because it sucks all the enjoyment out of what their experience is. So, you know, it's like you can only have so much empathy and sympathy for someone who's mad that they can't watch, you know, whatever show it is in one sitting. You know, it's like, you know, we have a lot bigger issues to deal with right now. Like a lot bigger problems in our lives to get really crazy about. This stuff is supposed to be novel entertainment, you know, to kill time.
Right.
You know, and take our minds off of the problems in the world. So, you know, well, whatever. It's go back and forth all day on what's right and wrong about it and what.
We're gonna go to about 1 o'clock, folks, and then we're gonna call it a midnight hour.
The midnight hour at 1.
Excellent. So, what's next?
Well, I will do a little PR here. We have some contests that are running in the community. I thought I'd bring people up to speed on. We have Cody, H&S Collectibles is still having his 750 sub contest. All these contests will be. You can find the links over either here or in the Midnight Hour Facebook group. We have of course we have the spices. They're giving away a steelbook Mothra. That's right. So they've given a steelbook Mothra away. It's March Monster Madness, and you can go to their page and enter. You get a chance to win Mothra and some hot sauce. We have what else do we have? We have a new a community member, a gentleman named Charles Cochran, who's just started out, and he is doing a contest to give away with a great prize package, including a Japanese version of the movie Pulse.
Oh, cool!
And we have another new community member, Danielle. She has a channel called The Girl and a Movie, and she's doing a 50 sub giveaway, but she's already blew past that. She's already past 80. But she is giving away a handmade, check this out. It's a handmade book. She works the pages where the book, if you look at it on a shelf, it says Halloween on it. The book from top to bottom. She's folded all the pages so it says Halloween on it. And she made some pumpkins to go along with it. It's pretty dynamic. We'll put the link down in the description box. And I think people will really like that to get enter. And I think that's it for contests.
Nice.
So lots to do. Yes. We're doing, let's see what else we're talking about. Well, that's pretty much for this. I mean, we don't have too much time to go. But I just wanted to bring everybody up to speed on contests.
Excellent. We've got I guess a super chat, right? Whether that's a super chat or not, I don't know, but it is a highlighted chat from Ben Grimm, who asks about Jet Jaguar. Has anybody seen the new Jet Jaguar design from the upcoming animated series Godzilla Singular Point? And yeah, he kind of looks like a 1970s robot remade as a 1950s, a sort of a rivet boiler robot.
Yeah,
from the 50s or 40s. Kind of weird looking.
Yeah, he sent me a picture of that. I thought it was a joke at first.
Yeah, the toys are already out in Japan. Put your orders in.
His sort of like all of his dimensions are just kind of off, at least on the toy. His like arms are way too long and his body is like too round, and it's just funky, man.
Kind of like a what do you call it? A forklift version of Jet Jaguar.
I am not
utility robot.
I am not getting that figure. No.
You'll get the Funko Pop, right? The Jet Jaguar single point Funko.
Yeah,
I don't think there's enough room in the Funko box to.
They have to ship his arms separately, dude.
Yeah, arms sold separately. You put it together.
I actually thought when Ben said that to me, I thought you were poking fun at me, making fun of Jet Jaguar. I did not realize that was the real deal. And I'm going like, no, just no.
Yeah.
Well,
they showed him in the trailer too, and the toys too.
Right. Well, like I said, it's like not everything's going to appeal to everyone equally, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of fans who are going to really dig it. So.
Yeah, it'd be good. It would be a good cartoon to watch. I mean, I like to see the cartoon, but I'm just not really excited about I'm not excited about the redesign.
Right. Well, a lot of people didn't like the original one either. We've grown in. He's grown on us since 1976 in the United States. So, there's still people that just don't like Jet Jaguar still anyway, no matter what.
I didn't know that. Jet Jaguar, he's badass.
I always love him, man. He comes with, he eats sushi from a pail, bro.
Yeah, he pounded Gigan and Megalon.
Yep.
He's the handshakinest kaiju I ever seen.
It's Megalon's a kid's movie. I love it. I love it for what it is.
Yeah, it's ridiculous fun, man.
Yeah.
That's all, it's like these things are entertainment. They're not supposed to be like works of Shakespeare. So, it's like and I'm not trying to say like, it's like when I have a pet peeve about any movie when people go, I enjoyed it, but it's not a perfect movie. It's like no movie is perfect. And who exemplifies that more than any other filmmaker is George Lucas, because he's still trying to make, up until he sold it to Disney, he was still trying to make the original 77 Star Wars perfect.
Yeah, that's the problem with all art. There's a point of diminishing returns when you try to make it perfect and you fuck the entire thing up.
George Lucas is a movie equivalent of a one-hit wonder.
Yeah.
He's had a couple, right? Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah. Well, he Spielberg directed it, but he produced it.
Yeah,
that was his idea. I think he wanted to direct it, and then he just like kind of was at that point, because of the pressure of trying to follow up a directorial after Star Wars was so high, he just couldn't handle directing it again and having it turn out bad or falling from grace, basically. So he had Irving Kershner do Empire and Spielberg do Raiders, and then he didn't direct another film for like a million years after that.
That wasn't a bad decision by him, though.
No. But he should. His best asset was always Gary Kurtz. Gary Kurtz was the man who kept George Lucas level-headed. And if Gary Kurtz was still partners with George when they made Return of the Jedi, it would have been a much, much better movie.
I like Return of the Jedi. I mean, I actually like Return of the Jedi very much. Just I liked it better of the first trilogy, but it seems like right after that, I mean, he just, I don't know, he just he just fell off. He just his writing was terrible. He just
The prequels are sand. I hate it. It's
I like
irritating.
Revenge of the Sith. I mean, I did enjoy Revenge of the Sith. I thought that was really good. But the one movie I had the biggest problem with him was the World War II movie he tried to do, Red Tails. Man, I just wanted to take him out back to the woodshed.
And why was that? Let me know why that is.
The Tuskegee Airmen, the Red Tails.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Totally poorly written. Yeah, really poorly written.
George wrote the screenplay of it. I take it.
Yeah, it was it was almost like an old-fashioned 1940s propaganda movie, and it just did not work on any level.
Right. Yeah.
And it was just it was terrible. I was so bummed sitting in the theater, and I wanted it to be so good, and I'm looking at it, and I just could not believe how bad it was.
Yeah, I had no interest in seeing it, so I didn't go. And the only reason why I had no interest in seeing it, and I love a good war movie, especially a good World War II movie, was that it was George Lucas directed. I think he wrote it, but somebody else directed it. And I was just like, I can't sit through another George Lucas script.
No, that's really,
especially when he has no direction and he's not bouncing it off other people anymore. I mean, I think he gets. I don't want to diminish the man because he made Star Wars, and I just didn't want to sit in the theater and be disappointed. I risked disappointment by just staying away.
I did not know that. Derek is saying that David Lynch was originally tapped to direct Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, they wanted David Lynch to do it.
Man, that would have been really interesting.
But what's funny is I go through a lot of old newspaper archives, right? Looking up stuff like local stuff for like San Francisco, like this movie. Where did this movie play when I was a kid? Where did this movie open? And like I even went far back into like where the original Dracula and Frankenstein, what theaters they played in San Francisco back in 31. I found an article that came out in late 1980, and it was an interview with the guy who ended up directing. Well, I can't remember his first name. Jedi Marquand is his last name. British director. It was an interview with him about a film he had just made that was just being distributed to theaters, and he already had the job directing Jedi at that point. And in the article, so by the fall of 1980, it was already decided that Marquand was going to direct Jedi. So the David Lynch stuff was probably very, very, very early on, and came and went quickly. I'm sure Lynch just turned it down when they first said it. He probably said no, and then he made Dune. So there you go. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Only one of those movies starred Sting, though. So
yeah, that's true. That's true. As long as he didn't sing in it, it was great. I used to like the Police, and then Sting became a jerk.
Is he a jerk? All I know is that he likes to have sex for a long time.
No, most people should. Most people should. They would probably be they would stay on the internet less and stop getting into arguments about Batman. Yeah, no, Sting. I don't like. He just said something really bad about a recording artist that I liked, and it was a big feud back in the late '80s, early '90s with a guy from Appalachia called Hazel Atkins, who wrote some songs that the band The Cramps covered later on. And he was this guy that recorded his own records up in Appalachia with his homemade recording equipment. He was a one-man band. He sang songs about making people eat hot dogs and cutting their heads off. Very, very horror-oriented hillbilly singer. And a lot of his stuff was put out by a company in New York. called Norton Records. After his initial early on recordings that he did in the late 50s and early 60s, he sent some of his singles, 45 singles that he did originally. He sent them to Richard Nixon at the White House when he was president, and he even got a letter back from the Nixon administration thanking him for sending these records. The guy was crazy. The guy was just this really sort of like outsider musical artist, and I guess there was a review that lauded had the first Hazel Atkins collection put out by Norton Records in the Village Voice in New York, and they didn't have good review for Sting's record, which had come out at that time. And so Sting took it personally and wanted to take it out on poor Hazel Atkins. So there was a magazine that the record company that put out the Hazel Atkins records, Norton Records, they were putting out a regularly published super zine, a very thick zine that came out about once or twice a year called Kicks, put together by Billy Miller and Miriam Lina, who was the original drummer of the Cramps when they first moved to New York from Ohio, and they just like loved the whole thing that happened between Sting and or how upset Sting was about Hazel Atkins. And the crowd roared, thunderous applause. Total sidebar. That's a little bit of a bad, unknown, who cares music trivia.
Is there really a Willow video game? That's pretty.
There
crazy.
should be.
Wow.
There should be. We're gonna get the TV series.
Yeah, that's what they were saying in the chat.
Yeah, I haven't seen the Pacific Rim yet. I hope it gets a home release.
I don't know. That's interesting thing going on with home video, physical media releases. Is that sales keep going down? Even in the pandemic, they were going down. So
Yeah,
because people shifting to streaming, but there's still going to be some labels that are going to hang on and put out really cool stuff.
I hear Disney's not going to put out their. I heard Disney says they're not going to put out their series on home media, Disney Plus. They said they're not going to put. That's a.
Well,
At least they could do is put it on video on demand at least. But
I think that's what's going to happen. They're gearing everything towards their streaming platforms, and it's sort of like if you own it, why are you going to pay them a monthly fee to watch it or to be able to access it? So it's sort of this, like they're trying to take back control of their intellectual property that way. Because when home video started back in the late 70s, all the studios were, we don't want to have anything to do with it. This is nothing. It's a flash in the pan. Who's going to want to record things off TV? And who would want to watch a movie, a Hollywood movie, a brand new movie or whatever on TV, when they should be seen in the theaters? This compromises the artistic vision, blah, 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 blah. And they didn't believe in it. And, they kind of got caught with their pants down, and they scrambled to try to wrestle control back in the early to mid 80s when it started taking off, home video. And it's the same thing now. It's like big companies like Disney are just trying to control what happens and how you can see what they're producing. Somebody will figure out how to rip that stuff from the streaming services. And,
well, there's already a website out there, though. I don't know how they'll do it with Disney. It's called Stinky Tuna, and that's what they do. They rip off. They rip the Netflix series off and sell them.
Okay. Yeah. So if there's anything that they do, there's going to be somebody who's going to be clever enough to work around those problems. So it's just unfortunate that it's like the shrinking number of people who collect physical media. It's just not profitable anymore. For some of the bigger companies, especially when a lot of the product that comes out is not really that great anyway, you know. And that's why it's great to have companies like Shout Factory and Scream Factory and other the Vinegar Syndrome and other companies that put out really crazy cult
Film
movies.
Arena, baby.
There you go.
Yeah, we're all physical media people here. That's the thing.
Yeah.
We're all physical media.
Yeah, I spent a lot of money on Japanese laser discs, and I still have them, and I still have a working laserdisc player.
You know, it's funny too. If he were to sell them, they would sell for crazy money.
Probably, you know.
VHS tapes are being sold for crazy money. Crazy money.
Yeah.
We have one person. I don't think he's here in the chat anymore, but he has just thousands of VHS tapes, and then he'll mention how much they're going for. A VHS tape is like it's almost the same price as it is now as when they first came out. Remember, those were like $80 when they first came out.
Yeah. I worked at Tower Video, the video section of Tower Records back in 83, 84. And I remember how expensive they were when Godzilla 1985 came out on VHS from New World Home Video. It was $89.99, and it wasn't. That wasn't for sale. That was for rental stores. That's how much a rental store would have to pay for it to have it in their shop to rent it out.
God.
And then later they released, a commercial version of it, but it was still, like $49.95 or $69.95. And New World Pictures was one of the first VHS companies labels that wasn't a fly by night like Good Times that put out like high quality, low cost VHS tapes about 88. And coincidentally enough, they were several of the 70s Godzilla movies. So they did Godzilla versus Gigan, Mechagodzilla 74, and I think that maybe it was just those two, but they were like the first tapes that sold for $19.95.
All right, guys. I think we're going to call it a night. I appreciate everybody coming out tonight and being here in the midnight hour. And
thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks for coming. We appreciate all the guests today. It's been absolutely fantastic. August, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You all have a wonderful evening, and we'll do it again.
Next
Be
Sunday.
safe,
Good night, everybody.
All right, guys.
Thanks a
Have a
lot.
good night, everybody in the chat.
Live long and prosper.